Hello, everyone. We are live for the post-Big Bang debate analysis, and my good friend David was willing to stay up all this time. What time is it there now? Pushing
12:15.
12:15. Thank you so much for staying up late to do a while it's fresh in our mind post-debate quick rundown analysis, insights, whatever happens to pop into our heads. We'll be sharing the link once David has had a chance to go through his top shelf analysis, meta-analysis, flowing, and chunking. Over to you, David, for the intro. I'm just going to grab a drink, but I will be listening in.
Okay, great. Yeah, I didn't flow the debate. It was a reasonable discussion. I guess Leo, did a good job. He probably thinks about this and studies a lot, knew a lot of information. I'm not sure he had, quite a systematized. If I remember, after your debate with T-Jump, he's the one who said that he only had taken like a course or two of university level physics, but he knew quite a bit about the topic and kind of the generic things people tell you about the Big Bang, a whole bunch of information. I'm not sure that kind of ran in circles to actually flow it to see did he address the exact points that you tried to make in the the conversation where she said he was kind of filibustering, where he was just kind of saying generic things about the Big Bang, or about how experts all agree about the Big Bang without a systematic knowledge of what it actually is involved in the Big Bang. I mean, generally I agree with Jennifer. I'm not a big proponent or fan of the Big Bang, and even from a scientific level, for like a cosmological level of the sense, as we talked about on Week in Review, that the material arises from the spiritual, but the questions purely scientifically based on predictions or what we know about science, that the Big Bang appears to me to be an extrapolation of a handful of data, like we discussed, like the expansion of the universe and a few various things that fit in. And if you take this going backwards, and then it's basically mathematical. So if you listen to most mainstream top physicists, like the big streamers, the people on the main channels, they'll talk about what happened in the first few seconds and the fundamental laws of physics. And generally I agree with Jennifer, and I'm not sure, Leo, it's commendable that he thinks about these things, that he's interested in it, and obviously he's defending the mainstream position, so he was able to just keep on pounding out information, but like a systematic understanding to have actually addressed Jennifer's points. Maybe in a future period she'll be able to debate people that actually have a background in physics. But perhaps it was a good showing on his part. It's definitely probably a good sign that Leo spends his time thinking about issues like this, where he's thinking about the origins of the universe and science and ideas. It's definitely a good thing to spend your time thinking about, and not being like a master on these topics. It's a tough thing to master, but he was kind of sloppy.
I had a little David on my shoulder telling me, remember to recap. So I hope I did better, at least than the last one, the T-Jump one.
I mean, recap, you did a little bit better at that, and minimize the demonstration of poor character, because really there was no reason to make it unfriendly, because you're debating about the Big Bang. It's not like a personal identity debate where you're debating about issues that are directly affect a person, like the JQ or immigration, or some of the more testy issues, multiculturalism, that you might see David debating more often, that would lead to God forbid, even like death threats, or I don't want you in my country, and various things, because we were just talking about the Big Bang and cosmology, so it's kind of impersonal and separate from the people. I did notice people were kind of complaining that Jennifer was kind of unfriendly, possibly. An issue that it's kind of hard to be blood sportsy about the Big Bang. And then Jennifer, like she had said, week in review, she kind of likes to turn these things into a teaching session. But like the Socratic method, where he just wants to ask you a bunch of questions to fill your knowledge out or something like that, which is like, okay, it's an interrogation, saying you have more background in science than he does. Oh, what realm is he going to be the one who's going to be testing, your knowledge to see whether you're qualified to have your own opinions about these things? So it was kind of like a B-level debate. I'm not saying there's anything bad about it. It's good to have B-level debates. And I'm not saying that, he's a good man. It looked like he thought a lot about the issue. He knew a lot about the issue. But I'm not sure he had enough of a background in science and mathematics to really address the concerns that you raised.
Well, I like how at the end, it was friendly. We talked like for a few minutes after we went off screen too, and it was like everybody thought it went really well. They're like, "Oh yeah, it was good," it was positive. So, and I was sort of under the impression, based on how it was billed, like it was debate me broth. So I thought it was kind of okay to go into the theatrics just a bit. So yeah, that was.
Well, I mean, when you deal with some sort of identity issue, it's more, the person is symbolic of the idea that they're debating. It's defensive, like, it's the JQ and you're attacking my identity. Then, like you could believe in the Big Bang and be like, okay, you're wrong. You don't understand science that well, but it's less of an identity, except, you attack the person like you don't know what you're talking about, or the nature of people when they're debating an idea to say, I'm speaking on behalf of science and objectivity. And I think you did good. Like I warned you to avoid moving the conversation towards like Christianity, where you're kind of like straw manning Christianity and probably sidetrack the debate to something that's completely not useful. And also to establish like who's credible in science, who more speaks on behalf of science. That it was good to avoid that. It did reach these kind of circles where I guess you call it filibustering, where you were trying to ask exact questions that would demonstrate difficulties within the Big Bang, like about why all the planets have the same age of the universe. And actually, I think I could have answered that from the perspective. I'm saying that if there was a singularity and everything arose from it and started expanding, that the planets in our solar system formed from the matter that had reached this area around our sun at the same time. That so I think there was somewhat of a reasonable explanation according to the general Big Bang for that question. You're not going to fold him for if he wasn't able to come up with the the right argument on the spot, but and also the point about the singularity and his like concordance model, the breaking down of the physical laws. It just seemed like a big circle. And then when you called filibustering, where you're just kind of like telling stories or general information or quoting authorities without really answering the question. And that's probably because he doesn't have a systematic understanding of the Big Bang in that way. Like you would need to talk to someone with a background in physics. He's probably a guy who watches videos and reads books on these issues, but it's different than someone that would have spent years in university struggling over equations and making these calculations, because largely the Big Bang and these understandings of what happened in the Big Bang comes from mathematical equations. And so it seemed unlikely that he would have had that experience where he's actually calculated these things out to understand how these ideas arise from somewhat mathematics.
Yeah, I think he has some experience. Like did say he read quite a bit of books, but he told me he's 25, so I don't know if I don't think he has a background in actual like physics at the university level, but he seems to be interested in it, science just as a general
Yeah, I think on that other show, the
thing.
first post T jump debate, it was funny because I remember quoting, where he said, he's only taken one course in university in physics, but he's pretty sure that he knows what he's talking about and you don't. And
Well,
but
they
said like
always
no,
say like there's a consensus in science. It's like that's not strictly true. Like there are certain things in science where there's more of a consensus than others, but it's a fallacy to say that there is a scientific consensus in all these fields. It's not necessarily true.
well, there probably is. I mean, that's what you didn't get too much into it. Where even at the end, someone had asked you that do you mind arguing against something that to a large extent the Big Bang is consensus among experts, and if the main people who talk about physics, like Carroll and Tyson and whatever the names, almost all hold of the Big Bang. Even that Professor Schroeder, Gerard Schroeder from Genesis and the Big Bang that we spoke to in Jerusalem, has with the PhD from MIT in physics, um, holds of the Big Bang. He just tried to correspond it to a biblical creationism, and actually, he was one of the first people to do that, as opposed to Jennifer's postulation that the Big Bang came into being because it corresponded to biblical cosmology. That actually, from my understanding, Professor Schroeder was one of the first people to actually correspond the Big Bang to a biblical narrative. But I think that is the mainstream. Um, that is the mainstream narrative, the mainstream thing they teach in physics. But generally, you don't learn about the Big Bang in regular physics. If you take an astronomy course or a physics course, I remember a little bit about the Big Bang, but we didn't actually have questions. I even took through 400 level physics courses. I don't remember any questions about the Big Bang, and the actual mathematics and physics of the Big Bang is actually pretty complicated. And but I mean, you just understand that they're extrapolating that if the universe appears to be expanding in all directions, although Jennifer, the question like the Andrometer strain, if it's not expanding, they might defend it and say that that it's moving in the same direction of us, and that it looks like it's moving towards us. There are various problems in it that he did not seem to know enough to address. So, like as I said, I think I knew enough about the topic, maybe even more than Leo, even though I don't believe in the Big Bang, that I think I could actually given the generic answers to the questions that you asked that the experts would have seen. And then the question about the singularity, is the concordance model doesn't have a singularity. He just kept on saying the concordance model of the Big Bang and like a holographic projection, and there might be various things like the multiple world hypothesis in various issues, but yeah, I say I mean, he was a good man. He knew a little bit about it, but it seemed I'm not sure if he was if you like. I mean, he's probably a good start for you to debate. You got good numbers. He's a good, I guess, regular on the show, and you might have even had better numbers with Amy Newman than if you actually had like a scientist or PhD in physics that had a better understanding of it. So it's an interesting dynamic that this person who doesn't really have a background in physics doesn't have like a real scientific systematic understanding of why the majority of science actually believe these ideas. He's just maybe well read and thought out on the subject. Probably actually garnered more views than if you did have someone who was like PhD and who did spend thousands of hours struggling to make these calculations and the mathematics for why the physicists hold these things about like how these things came into being the first second. And I've heard so many things like because I have so many books on the subject. I'm always showing Jennifer these Royal Society, Royal Institute, I watch mainstream physicists, and they're always talking like, about like the first second, the first, billionth of a second, and the origins of the laws. And I think there's some sort of mathematical basis for their supulation, but it does kind of sound just like random cosmology. And even at that point, like Hindu cosmology, the Temple of the Vedic Planetarium, the Canto of the Bhagavatam, or something like that. It sounds kind of similar, or even as mentioned, the Bible doesn't really have a creation ex nihilo story. The Bible has this pre-existent great bodies of water that were used to form the other parts of creation. But the Big Bang kind of sounds just like random cosmology. I disagree with Jennifer that it's necessarily biblical, and I think actually that physicist Gerard Schroeder was one of the first physicists to really try to correspond the Big Bang in the Bible. And honestly, I don't think that the Big Bang became popular theory because it corresponds with the Bible, but you could give that argument or have that reasoning.
I guess I was just going based off of like the endorsement from the Catholic Church about the Big Bang. That was, what is going on. I'm not like speculating or whatever. It just it does sort of seem that way. And and another thing that just seemed really weird was like they seem to be talking, not just him, but like a lot of these Big Bang people are kind of talking out of both sides of their mouth. They're saying it's not about the beginning of the universe, but it's about just after the beginning of the universe. Like it's a lot. It's like I said, like the evolution thing. It's just confusing. Like, what do they mean? It just seems like a lot of excuses sort of built in to that. It's like, well, the Big Bang's not supposed to predict why planets have the same age as the sun. It's like,
I think you're incorrect about that. Actually, that the Catholic Church does not endorse the Big Bang. It just has a compatibility. But the Catholic Church, the encyclical, does not actually endorse or say the Big Bang is correct. It just says that the Big Bang is not in contradiction to Catholic doctrine. But it's not. The Big Bang is not part of Catholic doctrine. And I mean, we could look into that, but I'm pretty sure you're incorrect about that.
Well, I just looked it up, and the second link I got was Big Bang Theory, a Roman Catholic creation.
Yeah, I mean, you would have to look at the actual encyclical because there's just an article about it. So, I mean, the Pope wrote an encyclical that says that there's no contradiction between evolution and the Big Bang and Catholic doctrine, but it didn't make the Big Bang part of Catholic doctrine. It just says that there's no contradiction.
Well, I didn't say it was part of the Catholic doctrine. I said it was consistent with Catholic doctrine, and it was used to bolster the legitimacy of the Catholic Church, right? So I don't really think that there's... Yeah, so Pope Francis, Big Bang Theory doesn't conflict with God, Catholics in the Big Bang Theory,
Yeah, I think you're incorrect about that. The Catholic doctrine doesn't endorse the Big Bang. It just says that it's acceptable in that they don't...
That's not what I said. You're mischaracterizing what I said. What I said is that they use the Big Bang to bolster the legitimacy of their religion.
I don't think so.
Yeah, so that does appear to be what is going on. And that's your reason for it not being true.
Well, I would look at I mean, if you want, I'll find the actual encyclical where...
Well, anyway, I don't know if anyone in the audience wants to come on, but that would be cool. I'm a little talked out after the debate, but I'd love to hear if people had any feedback or thoughts about how it went. I would love to hear that. And I know there was somebody in the Discord saying they didn't get their question answered during the combo, so could definitely answer that now if anyone wants. Otherwise, I don't know if David wants to keep talking. We can keep going, or if you just want to wrap it up after a quick one, because I know it's pretty late there. So what do you think? I think like so you agree it was like better than the T-jump one?
Well, no, I mean because T-jump T-Jump was like your interrogator, because T-Jump had more position. Like, you have seniority relatively to Leo. I mean, T-Jump is a more popular, famous character. He's the house debater, basically, for modern day debates. I mean, maybe Leo's been on modern day debate, but like, no, I think you probably, even to most standards, outrank Leo. So I don't think it's the same nature. He might have tried the same attempt, but like, no, I'm saying T-Jump is, probably much older than Leo, much more experienced, and is a famous debater. So it's not it wasn't the same caliber or quality debate at all. And he didn't have he didn't actually have he didn't actually have standing to interrogate you. So T-Jump, kind of, that's what he does, and that was somewhat like an initiation, right, or like an interview to see, like, are you qualified? What is this woman thinking? And so Leo attempting to do that to you doesn't, saying you have more subs, you have more education than him, you're older than him, that he wasn't really in a position to, verify whether you know what you're talking about or not, so to say, as opposed to T-Jump. At least, that's what he does. I mean, Leo could be kind of like a wannabe or protege of T-Jump, but he's got a long way to go, and presumably, T-Jump in modern day debate, there's actually benefit and gain. They have a big audience and network that if you pass the test, so to say, would have been worth your while to go through T-Jump's interrogation, as opposed to Leo. I'm not saying it wasn't worth your while to debate him, but like, no, I mean, he's not going to be able to like conduct like an initiation right on you, or pass some test for you to enter some greater network, because presumably you already outrank him. I mean, if you want to use the terminology.
Well, there was a couple times where it felt like he was trying to drag me down a T-Jump, alley. Like, he was trying to ask me about like what I knew about stars. It was like, let's not go there. So I think I did a good job keeping it off the ultra weeds that it ended up being with T-Jump, because I just sort of didn't interject on T-Jumps. T-Jumps was smoother at like bringing it into the weeds. I didn't really notice we were in the weeds till had already been there for a while. Whereas with Leophilius, I sort of realized the question, I wasn't going to go and entertain questions that didn't relate directly to the subject. Because it just, you see these conversations, these debates go off in the weeds and then stay in the weeds on these abstract things like necessity, right? Like, he's trying to drag it into it being what do you mean by necessary? Because I was saying that the Big Bang necessitated a singularity, and want to drag it into like the metaphysics of what necessitates means. It's like, no, everyone knows what that word means. Everyone is already, you don't need to define every last word, so I think I maintain control. Like, the only times I didn't was maybe when he started like rambling for minutes at a time, but I did eventually call him out on the filibustering thing.
But I mean, everybody's screaming. They just kind of want to tell stories or explain, like, really, as a mirror of your own bad karma, so to say, where you just said, like the other day, and I said, like, it was bad that you said you wanted to, like, your dream was, or that you'd like to just turn it into the teaching session. So him also, he was like, he didn't really want to debate you. He just wanted, eventually for it to become a platform for him to tell stories and explain, his knowledge. And so both of you, to some extent, hopefully I warned you against that, because I told you, like, no, you're signing up for a debate. Like, you're not going to try to turn it into a teaching session. It's supposed to be a back and forth. And maybe he didn't have that, Davidical warning, where I told him, like, no, like, you don't want to turn it into a teaching session. It's a debate. If you want a teaching session, make some videos or create a teaching session. But it's a debate. It's supposed to be a back and forth. And then, we call it talking past each other, where, you said something and then he just had, I'll call them like prepared remarks, but certain ideas that he wanted to give over that may not have really been directly related to what you're saying. So it wasn't a proper kind of like flow back and forth. Like you could flow it, like you said this, and then he said that, but they were really only tangentially related to each other. What what he was saying to what you were saying.
Yeah, vaguely related at best to the topic at hand. I think that's one of your quotes. And then just having watched some of these debates, in these circles, like even in modern day debate, and you could argue, Amy Newman's channel is a little bit like more laid back because they allow people on and it's a round table type thing. But even in modern day debate, like it becomes easily into the weeds. Like there's a recent evolution debate that ended up not really in the weeds, but they weren't talking about the original topic. They were both sort of agreeing that evolution didn't really answer everything, and that there was, still a lot of questions and how cool it all was. But yeah, it's hard to really keep it on a debate because you got to almost keep reminding yourself midway, like, what is this really about? What are we really fundamentally disagreeing on? And would you agree that there were times where, like, he was evasive of my questions?
Well, I'm sure if he was evasive, like he may not just have had the background to directly answer your questions, and you just use it as a prompt to give over some of his knowledge. Like he wanted to teach rather than answer your questions, so he just looked at your questions as an opportunity for him to give over some of the stuff that he had learned about, or like a prompt for him to teach, so to say, which is what I was trying to warn you about. Just to make it clear, like, this is just straight Wikipedia. Evolution in the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church holds no official position on the theory of creation or evolution, leaving the specifics of either theistic evolution or literal creationism to the individual within certain parameters established by the Church. According to the Catechism of the Catholic Church, any believer may accept either literal or special creation with the period of an actual 6-day, 24-hour period, or they may accept the belief that the earth evolved over time under the guidance of God. Catholicism holds that God initiated and continued the process of his evolutionary creation, and that all humans, whether specially created or evolved, have and have always had specialty created souls for each individual. So I'm pretty sure that no, the Catholic Church definitely does not endorse the Big Bang or evolution. It just says that it's an acceptable position, and that you could be a Catholic and believe in evolution or the Big Bang, but you could also be a Catholic and believe in intelligent design. And unlike Protestants, who generally reject evolution and believe exclusively in intelligent design, the current position of the Catholic Church is that there's certain things that you're required to believe, like a certain form of accepting the 6 days of creation and the soul and the personal relationship with God. But it's up to the individual Catholic believer whether they want to believe in evolution, the Big Bang, or straight intelligent design. So that's the official position of the Church. There is no official Catholic acceptance or endorsement of evolution or the Big Bang, just that it's acceptable. You're not going to be excommunicated, or you could have a Catholic school and teach evolution in the Big Bang within the confines of certain limitations.
Well, my opinion hasn't changed.
Well, your opinion is what?
That this theory wouldn't exist without the Catholic Church. And it is something that was invented in order to justify the metaphysics of the Bible. And it continues to be promoted for that reason. That's the scientific explanation of it. Now, you can say maybe not, maybe it's not really, and try to hair split, but the evidence is what it is. And it's sort of like with the Big Bang being the beginning of the universe or not the beginning. It's like distinction without a difference, right? You want to say, they say it's acceptable and didn't endorse it. It's like it's a distinction without a difference.
Well, no, I'm saying
Pope
that
is saying, if the Pope
generally
is
the church
saying that, if the Pope is mentioning it, that's endorsement.
No, I mean, it's specifically I mean, there's an encyclical that I mean, Catholicism has a system similar to Orthodox Judaism, where you have encyclicals and canonical law, and you could just read the encyclical, and the encyclical very clearly says that it doesn't endorse the Big Bang or evolution, and that it's up to the believer, and that you can be a Catholic and believe in evolution and the Big Bang within certain limitations on the theory, that the church puts certain core beliefs that have to be included, and says that it's possible to have those beliefs together with the Big Bang and evolution, but the church has no official position on it, and actively does not endorse it.
Okay. Even though
I mean,
the
you just
first
look it up. You could just look.
first link that comes up when I go Big Bang Catholic Church is, the Pope would like you to accept evolution and the Big Bang.
By who?
Smithsonianmag.com.
Yeah, I mean, that's Smithsonian. There's nothing to do with the Catholic Church. I mean, it's just fake news.
Even though it's saying the Roman Catholic Church is pro-evolution and Big Bang. That's just made up.
Well, I'm saying the Smithsonian endorses evolution and the Big Bang. The Smithsonian's, largely a governmental scientific institute that endorses and fully is behind, the paradigm of evolution and the Big Bang, but it's not a Catholic source. I mean, I just showed you. Even Wikipedia says no. Just go to Wikipedia and it says that, and I showed you the encyclical that that's not what the church actually says. So I mean, what the Smithsonian.
So the Catholics banned every other possible explanation to the exclusion of the Big Bang, but somehow that's not the same thing as them endorsing it.
No, I'm saying that the Catholic Church has a range of acceptable cosmologies, and saying the Catholic Church has just said that basically all the Catholic Church said is that the evolution of the Big Bang is not heresy. So if the Smithsonian is saying that's an endorsement, maybe you could play around with words, but no, that's not what it said. The Catholic Church is just.
I'm not the one playing around with words here.
Well, you're quoting the Smithsonian, not the Catholic Church. Smithsonian does not, has nothing to do with the Catholic Church. Why don't you find something actually from the Catholic Church that says it endorses evolution?
Well, we're talking about the Big Bang here.
I'm saying obviously you're talking Google, so I mean it's just
the person who came up with it was himself a Catholic.
Yeah, I'm saying historically, like 90% of scientific ideas came up by Catholics, because science was.
It's not true in the least.
Well, I mean, some of them were Protestants, but no, I mean the university system was part of the Catholic Church. All scientists were part of the Catholic Church until the Protestant Reformation, and so unless they're Northern Europeans, till a certain period of 1600, even later, all scientific discoveries were basically under the Catholic Church, and then after that, still the majority, beside the Royal Institute in London, was under a Protestant church.
Does that bring him under suspicion for being lying liars who want to justify their religion but not actually scientifically? Just using science to justify religion? Does that allow for that possible explanation?
Well, science was a branch of theology. So historically, the university system, created about 800 years ago, for the first 400 years of the university system, all scientists were Catholic, that all universities were under the Catholic Church, and the study of all science was under the Catholic Church. And so, yes, all sound scientific discoveries were made by Catholics. I mean, you had a handful of Jews that made a few discoveries, but besides for that, like the Islamic age, that in the Greek system, you had your 7 sciences of music, and but when they created the university system, you studied theology, and physics was a branch of theology, so that all physicists were theologians within the Catholic Church, till the Protestant Reformation. And they said the Royal Society of London, the Royal Society of Paris was a Catholic institute. So Leibniz was a Catholic. I would even say, I would have to look it up. I wasn't prepared to talk about this issue, but I would presume that probably over half of the discoveries of modern physics were made. Not modern physics, but of the major physics were made by Catholics. Obviously, Newton was an anti-Trinitarian, but Leibniz was a Trinitarian and a Catholic.
Mm.
It's just factual. I'm saying that's why I said, you just demonstrate you don't know what you're talking about.
Well, you're proving my point. You're saying the Catholic Church had enormous influence in science. And now that something they came up with turns out to be wrong, you're just like, well, it's actually not the Catholic Church who came up with it. It's like, yeah, it is. They were wrong.
The Catholic Church controlled the university system, so all scientific discoveries were basically under the Catholic Church. That as I said, that physics originally was a branch of theology, and the Catholic Church dominated.
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying. You don't have to keep. We can just change the subject. I don't want to.
Well,
we already talked about this on the last show. You're just going to keep on repeating your same excuses. That is fine. I get it.
It's not an excuse.
You're not changing my mind.
You just don't have a accurate historical narrative.
Well, one of us doesn't.
Yeah, was Leibniz a Catholic? Was Leibniz a Catholic or not?
I'm just going by the evidence. To say was Leibniz a Catholic is not the same thing as Catholics came up with the majority of scientific discoveries. It's not the same question. And then another question is: was his Catholicism responsible for the science? That's the question. And it's like, well, calculus doesn't really have most of these arguments that have their origins in the cosmological argument, that's a ripoff of Vedanta. So this cosmological argument that's so central to so many things is ripped off of Indians, but yet it's Western civilization that, it's the Catholics that did it. It's like, no, they just cherry picked from Vedantic sources to justify stuff. Like, I have a precedent for this, right? The guy who did, who is the one who did mostly the cosmological argument? I forget his name. Aquinas. He's not arguing for the biblical God. He's arguing for the impersonal God. He's using metaphysical argumentation, i.e. first cause. Where'd that come from?
From Aristotle. It's a he's the neo.
It comes from India. That is its origins in India. There's no question about that, right? The cosmological argument is an Indian thing from Vedanta. It's a basic principle of Vedanta. It has to do with establishing causality. It's basic, right? So using something that was already established
he took it from
to justify a particular theological interpretation has a precedent in Catholicism. So they just took it to justify their own religion, right? So there's a precedent for taking something from the prestige of science to try to justify these religious principles. I have a precedent for that.
Yeah, maybe you don't really know history so well.
Even though I just cited yet another historical precedent of the Catholic Church passing off Vedantic teachings as its own in an effort to bolster the legitimacy of the Bible.
Yeah, but it's just not accurate. It was from Aristotle and the Greeks that it comes from.
Not India, even though I can point to places in Indian history that have these exact same arguments. They didn't rip those off of Indians and pass them off as their own in Greece.
No, I mean it came from Aristotle.
Even though the Pythagorean theorem can be directly traced to the Shalba Sutra, and Pythagoras himself studied under people that had learned from India.
That's possible, but I'm saying that the Anselm and Aquinas were neo-Aristotelians, that the cosmological argument comes from the Greeks. If you're going to claim that the Greeks got their stuff from India, that's largely disputed and not mainstream history. That
you can just cherry pick when you appeal to mainstream history when it fits what you already agree with, I guess.
Well, it's because you haven't actually read the literature. You can't.
I've looked at the evidence.
You can't look at the names or a chain of transmission.
Science is about evidence. Science is about evidence, not about what was written down in a book. What's written down in books doesn't really prove anything, does it?
Well, it's even those
That's the whole point
even
of the Big
those sutras
Bang.
from India, you can't even demonstrate that they were written before the period of Pythagorean. You can't even date any of those sutras before, like, generally 500 AD, as where the Aristotelian work, the Pythagorean, the Greek work is easily datable, a few centuries before the Common Era.
So what's that supposed to prove?
We're saying that the traditional accepted understanding is that these arguments, the cosmological, the ontological argument,
I'm aware. I'm aware. Is
from the
that
Greeks.
actually true, though?
They came from the re-emergence of the ancient Greek text in Europe about 1,000 years ago.
And you're saying the Greek stuff just came about in a vacuum, then?
Well, the origin of how the Greeks came about it, say it's disputed, but no mainstream scholars hold that it came from India. I mean, the Alexander the Great.
That's actually not proving what you think it's proving.
One thing, Alexander the Great is after Aristotle. That Alexander the Great would have been the first major transmission, of Greeks going to India, and that's already after Pythagoras and Euclid and Aristotle.
All right.
And even the texts that possibly have this stuff in
so it was written in a book, therefore it's true, even though the evidence is right there in front of us and it's blatantly obvious Pythagoras was educated by Indian texts, blatantly obvious, because he couldn't derive.
No, there's zero evidence for that.
He couldn't derive the Pythagorean theorem. There's your evidence. Where did it come from? It just plopped out of nothing. He couldn't prove it.
People
I don't
knew
even
the
think
Pythagorean
Westerners can
theorem
prove
in
it
all
now.
traditions. Like there's evidence in almost all ancient traditions that they had some sort of understanding of the Pythagorean theorem. The Pythagorean was the most early historical note. Although it's likely the ancient Egyptians knew it, the Indian scripture, Vedic scripture that has the Pythagorean theorem, at least according to archaeology, can't be dated. Is dated at a later date. That if you believe in the scripture, it goes back to a later period of time. But the first evidence of the scripture is at a later time. But I understand your belief system, but that the evidentiary claims that no, it clearly comes from the Greeks, and any supplication that the Greeks got their knowledge from ancient India is just that. It's just a theoretical.
I know. There's a lot of hatred towards India. I know.
There's zero hatred. There's
a long-standing jealousy of India. I know. It's all good. I think the truth will come to light before.
I don't have any. I don't have any dog in the fight, whether it's Greece or India. Just that I have my Western education and
indoctrination.
And I know at the Hare Krishna temple, people sometimes say what you say, and I occasionally meet some Indians. I have some books on the subject, but the evidence is lacking. Even the internal Indian evidence of the ideas. And I have these books on my shelf of Vedic mathematics, but to ascribe them to ancient dates is very difficult. And
sure, because we want to make history match up with young Earth creationism, don't we? And just burning everything prior to that makes it a lot easier to do that, doesn't it? So more evidence for my theory. You've generated
we don't have to argue
more
about
evidence
this on,
for
but
my theory.
I think Jennifer is sadly mistaken on that, and it's probably just due to
another anecdote of historical
history.
retro engineering. It's
another Jennifer doesn't really read books
of historical re-engineering.
So she just has these theories that aren't actually based on evidence or knowledge.
Anachronization. It's an anachronism justifying young Earth creationism. Oh, nothing happened before 5,000 years ago, I swear. There was nothing going on. Yeah, okay. If it's written in enough books, that makes it true, I guess.
Well, at least didn't get into this in the debate, because it probably would have just made you look bad, because you probably would just demonstrate you don't really know what you're talking about.
Well, one of us would have. I don't think it's something people change their mind on, though.
You wouldn't have been
never
able
been
to quote any
exposed to it.
source. You wouldn't accurately. You haven't even read the text. To give names and dates and places. Like you just that would have been beyond your ability. So you make these wild assertions and would have had no ability to give names, dates, and places.
But I would have been able to anecdotally substantiate it, unlike my opponent. I would have been able to substantiate it with one anecdote after anecdote after anecdote of the church doing this. And then it's like, why would the church stop lying in an effort to bolster its legitimacy now?
I mean, you're like Gandalf or Claire. Like you just have your axe to grind against the church. That's fine.
It's not an axe to grind. It's a statement of fact. And it is a
but
bit
you don't
disappointing
have
that people
names,
don't
dates, and
understand it.
places. You're not actually bolstering your ideas with facts, with names, dates, and places.
I thought I just did. But anyway, we can move on to a different topic. I don't want to beat this dead horse any longer. We're just clearly, it's not something we're going to agree on. So if no one's going to come on, I guess we can wrap it up pretty soon, because unless there's something else about the debate, that it's worth talking about. But do you think it's worth flowing, actually? That reminds me.
No, it was largely unflowable. I mean, really, you should probably just make your own videos. Like you're saying, you want to teach like your PowerPoint, you should just monologue your own videos and to have like a class or like a propositional student that's like asking you questions is probably maybe like a chat, but like at some point, if you want to advance in your streaming, you just have to make PowerPoints and start like doing a series of videos explaining your thought processes and your theories, and maybe take questions or people from the chat, but they're probably less understandable to people when you have a person asking questions, and even you who doesn't like the Socratic method. But like,
I don't dislike it. It just has problems, and they're unacknowledged as of yet. Yeah, I don't mind.
It was good that you made a PowerPoint.
The Socratic method is really good. Sometimes it does work very well, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it's counterproductive. People are just using it, assuming it works all the time, and it's like this wonderful method that can't be questioned. But it's like it has its limitations. It's like skepticism. When it fails, it really fails because it's predicated on the teacher knowing more than the student. And if the student attempts to do the Socratic method, you're limiting it to the knowledge of the student. No teacher is perfect, so Socratic method is just a way to get ingrained into the same fallacies all the time with no way out, because you're always presupposing a conclusion. It's the whole point of the Socratic interrogation, which is why I'm really glad. Best part of the debate was that I didn't get baited into going down the garden road of some totally random line of Socratic Inquisition that was going to be something completely unrelated to the topic at hand. That's probably
there usually has to be a power differential. That the Socratic method implies some sort of power asymmetry, where the person doing it has the power and the value proposition that they have something that the other person wants. So T-Jump doing the Socratic method on you, that you subjected yourself to that because he had something that you wanted, like he had a seat at, so to say, the Institute Modern Day Debates. He's already a member in good standing, a senior debater there, and you wanted in to his institute, and therefore had to subject yourself to his interrogation as the somewhat the price of admittance. Like if you go to Harvard Law School and you want that degree from Harvard in order to gain entry to their network, and you subject yourself to the Socratic method, and the same in rabbinic school or the Greek academy or Vedic academy, where there's an accepted authority, and there could be buildings and money and institutes and inherited followers. And
it's predicated on an accepted authority, right?
Well, it's predicated on a power asymmetry.
Okay.
That I mean, you could say, I don't accept your authority, like Harvard or something. Like,
so what happens if the authority is not accepted, but the Socratic dialogue nevertheless begins?
Well, if the power asymmetry is real, that you say like, okay, like I don't accept the authority of the people who are currently in power, but I recognize that they have power and I don't. that there's there's a seat of power and there's a whole bunch of guns, and so to say they're going to be pointed at you, not at me. And so there's a power differential that you might be right and I might be wrong, but the guys with the guns are pointing them at you for me. They're not pointing them at me for you. And that's the power asymmetry. And if not like a question of violence, but it's like there's a University of Michigan, or there's a University of Ottawa, and there's a classroom, and there's a guy at the front of it getting paid who has an official position, and it's not you, it's someone else. And you could say, I don't respect that institute, but if you want to gain entry into the institute, there's going to be someone at the front of the class, and it's not going to be you.
I agree. I agree with certain aspects, and I certainly agree with science. It's just it's the
Well, I mean,
interpretation
the power
side.
asymmetry.
Yeah, I get it, but I mean, you're
the
sort of
person
framing
could
it
be
like I'm
wrong.
rejecting it entirely, but I wouldn't say
Well,
that
you
that's
can
strictly
reject it.
true.
Saying the power asymmetry is still accurate. So like money
Okay.
is karma. You could
Oh,
still
okay, I
you
see
could
what
be
you're saying.
poor. You could be so you might be poor. You could be right, and the power asymmetry is still real. That you're still going to
Sure.
have to humble yourself before the person with money. When you want to take out the business loan, it doesn't matter if you're right and the person with money is wrong, because there's a power asymmetry, and you want what the other person has. So it doesn't
I
matter.
wouldn't go that far.
Well, it did, because you were the one who requested to go on modern day debates. So to say, you wanted what they had.
Oh, okay. I
They
thought
didn't-
you meant something. I thought you meant to do with this
You
Leophilius
requested
debate.
to go. You requested to
I
go
thought.
to
Sorry, no, I
University.
get it. You're right. You're right.
You
I thought
applied to go
I
to
thought you were
University of Ottawa,
referring.
right? You
I
submitted
thought you
an
were referring to the
application.
Leophilius debate. I get it. I take your point. You were referring to the modern day debate, and yeah, I get it.
Well, and I mean,
No,
even
you're
made
right.
the point that the power asymmetry might have even been on your favor in terms of the debate tonight. But I was saying, like, generally, like the Socratic method, like you had to submit an application to go to University of Ottawa, and you had to pass their admissions, and you didn't give them grades, they gave you grades. And modern day debates, you're the one who requested to go on their show. It wasn't the other way around. They already had built up their network, and their network presumably is going to keep on going fine without you. Might be better with you. They maybe accepted you, but they already have their institute, and therefore the Socratic method, so to say, implies that power asymmetry, and Leo didn't have that power asymmetry to really imply, like, why would this guy be asking you questions to ascertain your level of knowledge? Like, you actually have a degree in physics, you actually have a channel with more subs than him, you've actually successfully debated T-jump and JF and so on and so on, that power asymmetry didn't exist in order that you should subject yourself to his Socratic method.
Gotcha. I like that way of framing it.
And that's why I even mentioned you aim for the 1,000 subs. You got 990.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm almost there. Only 10 more subs. Thanks to all the people who've recently subs, and to the long-term subs for your loyalty. We really appreciate you coming up and checking us out. Just leaving a crack of the door of the mind open, just to see what ideas are worth thinking about.
Yeah, and then the value proposition, like how you're going to grow your channel, or what does it mean that to even be a teacher on YouTube, how to expand your teaching, or the role of debate in growing your channel, spreading your ideas. Saying, but you're probably at the point where you should probably just start monologuing, teaching videos that have your series of. I have like over 30 public study sessions. That's basically, some of them have even you're on a few of them coming on, or people talking, but they're basically just me rambling for hours and hours. And so that's probably like your next step. Like, that's what you need to do. You just need to start making long explanatory videos for other people to watch at their own leisure.
Yeah, that sounds like a paid job to me.
Well, I say if you get, well, I mean, saying it's the essential service of the teachings that maybe you're going to be like, you're only going to do if you
doing
get
the
paid.
debates and the weekend review and stuff like that. That's essential service. Me making an entire curriculum for other people to make it easier for other people to plagiarize me. That's not part of my duties. So yeah, definitely I love teaching. It's just like that's going to be a paid job
Okay, well, I looked at
as you're
different.
framing it. Yeah, I mean,
saying,
I get it. It's just that the amount of work it would take for me to do that would be considerable. So I'm fine to have a one-on-one conversation with someone who wants to come in and I'll show them the actual inquiry method that the Socratic method is a phony imitation of, and we can go from there because that's beneficial to the audience. Me just blabbering, there's no real guarantee anyone's going to be able to get anything out of that I want them to get out of it.
well, okay, but so I guess I'll sign
Yeah,
off.
it doesn't look like anyone's going to come on to talk about the debates, so I guess it's probably pretty late. People are tired, but maybe next time, and we'll have weekend review and give people a chance to say their 2 cents about the debate. I thought it went really well. I wish I had more time to get my ideas out. I would have preferred like a 20-minute opener just because I was coming back with an alternate theory, so I wish I had more time to explain it. But other than that, it was good, and overall, like, I don't think there's any bad vibes between us now, and because it's really just all about the ideas.
What's so that you have your own content to refer people to, that people, like the debate, people tune in for the zingers or the back and forth, and that's why you need your own content. Saying that you give a 10-minute introduction and say, if you want to, know more, here's a video of me doing a 2-hour ramble explanation of what I just said. So the debate goes hand in hand together with other content that you've already produced. And that's, like I said, that really the same thing that you're complaining about, Leo, is what I was warning you against that you didn't want to do. That you're saying like no, it's a debate, it's not a teaching session. And so you didn't like that Leo wanted to filibuster by turning it into his teaching session, where he's like, no, Jennifer, it's not a debate. I'm here to teach the audience. Like, people want to listen to me explain my ideas to them. That's what they're here for. It's like, no, it's a debate. There's supposed to be a back and forth. And if you want to, have your teaching session, that's what your own channel's for and your own content for. So that's, the main thing I'm trying to express in the recommendation, and even say like monetary, saying that if you have such great ideas, it should be easy to make money. Like, the money is karma. I'm actually having Lipton Matthews look like 10 o'clock on Thursday from the Van Mises Institute talking about IQ. But tried to tell Gandalf that making money is usually the most indicative example of expertise. That if you really know what you're talking about, you make money off of it. And that, saying that they, if maybe like to have a book, like people like, do you have peer reviewed? But like JF doesn't have a peer reviewed paper on the revolutionary phenotype, but at least he has a book. And I think even JF said tonight, I watched that he's taking a break, but saying that I've been recommending to Jennifer that she should write a book, and at least have that inform, and then it could even be monetary, where you have some sort of income where people could watch that. And if you want to know more, buy my book.
Awesome. Would you guys mind talking for 2 minutes while I go grab something to eat, because I'm about to fall over? But I do want to keep it going, and I know Dubin wants to go to bed, so I do want to talk to Jason. But Dubin, could you just do it for a couple
Jason,
minutes?
is your first time on Church of Entropy?
I don't think we've talked, but I actually saw you, I think maybe on Amy Newman's stream.
Oh, yeah.
Lately. Yeah, so I do recognize you, but I'll be back in like 2 minutes and I'll be listening, and if that's okay.
Yeah. So I hate to come in at the very end. So I know
she'll probably stay on. Like, I'm her regular streaming partner, so I was just about to sign off, but like, she's not. I'm always harping on. She's got a monologue. Like, she's a streamer, but she's not good at monologuing, or just. So if I had signed off, she probably would have just closed the stream. But if you stay on, she'll probably. Or carry on to a certain extent, as long as you have a serious conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, I thought the debate was interesting. I mean, I'm not a physicist or a cosmologist or anything like that, but I am a scientist. So I was a little disconcerting to hear her say that she had issues with peer review. Now, I certainly understand there are issues. There can be conflicts of interest. There can be concerns around peer review that may make it not unbiased. But I think that the concept of peer review is extremely important. And I think that goes in line with the overall, I don't know if I would say concern I had with the discussion, which is, there's a body of science, of scientific literature and evidence that would, I think, and I could be wrong about this, but that is countervailing to what Jen was saying. And if she feels that she's got a superior model, then she should be able to publish that and would have no problem having that be exposed to scientific scrutiny. And if that's not the case, if she's like, well, I don't want to do that for whatever reason, my perspective is it doesn't lend support to her particular model. So
yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. That's why I was telling she publish even if it's not like a paper that would be peer reviewed, at least like a popular book that she could sell, or like a quasi science. And obviously peer review is an extension of the scientific method, that you could separate the idea from yourself, and someone else could take that idea and so to say test it. And if it's peer review to say that here's the idea separate from you, whatever was in your head, that you put it onto paper, and someone else could look at it and try to make sense of it on their own, and like in a like a Talmudic way or something, that saying that, or just communication theory, that you have an idea in your head and you've said it to me, and I put it into my own understanding to say it over, that you say, okay, this is what you said, and I said it in my own words, and it's like, yeah, that's basically it. And then that you could say it over to somebody else, and if it's science, it works. So I mean, the detractors of Jennifer, my question, like, does she actually have a model or anything new at all? And in terms of the debate, it's irrelevant. Like, she's just saying that Big Bang is not really scientific, that that's almost fantastical religious cosmology, that whether she has her own model or competing model is irrelevant to her critiques of the Big Bang. And so I've talked to Jennifer for a few years now. She's got quite a bit of ideas. Does she actually have a model that says anything new or not? To some extent, is still yet to be seen. Because you do have to go through that process of clearly writing it out and saying that this is my idea, and say, like, in a scientific way, where you have to do a thorough historical review of the literature on the topic and show what are the the great minds of the past or present say about the issue, and what are you saying that's new and unique, and where does that fit in with the within the historical review. Like anyone, I mean, I guess you say you're a scientist. I don't know if you ever published a scientific paper.
Considerably, yeah, large number. Yeah, I'm a climatologist. So
okay. I'm back, by the way.
So the
if
process.
You want to head off, but I'm back now. I can take back over. I've got my fried potatoes. I don't want to keep you.
Okay. Yeah, great. Yeah, I mean, it's
and I do want to talk to Jason Tom. He seems like an impressive specimen, so this should be a good one.
I've never been called an impressive specimen, but I'll take it. So
it was the first time for everything.
That's true.
Nice meeting you, Jason. If you
nice meeting you.
We can review sometime. Yeah. Great, and enjoyed the conversation. And say, like, I've been trying to convince Jennifer to monologue. It's difficult, and like I said, she just make videos explaining her stuff. And this is what she loves, arguing about, or some sort of back and forth discussion method of teaching, which is more religious or Vedic or Talmudic than scientific. Like scientific is more like a presentation of paper that could be independently taken, and then someone objectively saying, I don't need Jennifer to to explain her theory because I have her paper that says her theory, and she might have deeper insight or be able to explain it on a deeper level. But no, I mean, once it's been published, it largely becomes separate from the person that anybody else could add upon it. And then also, the question of, did you actually add something unique? Are you just saying, a compilation or combination of what other people have said, or have you actually added something unique? So have a great night. Good job, Jennifer. Good debate. So hopefully hit the 1,000 subs. And thanks for coming on, Jason. If you ever want to come on, we can review anytime.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah. So, okay. Peer review, it hasn't existed for very long, first of all. Like, we sort of have to realize the context we're operating in, that like this approach didn't work. Wasn't operating until maybe 100 years ago. Like, I think even Einstein had issues with it. So I think there is obviously something to be said for it, to having your work checked. Because if you made a technical error, you don't want to be putting that out, right? But then this additional side of it, where it's like, what it essentially serves as is a bottleneck and doesn't allow other potentially better ideas in. That's where the problem is that it has like inertia. So this Big Bang is a perfect example of why peer review is a problem, right? It shouldn't have even ever been accepted, right? But because of the Catholic Church, it was. And now it's just there. So everyone has this sunk cost fallacy where it's like, well, we can't go against the Big Bang because now we look like fucking idiots because we have all of this work invested in it, right? That's the issue. Also the bigger issue. So that was me sort of playing it from your side and giving you the benefit of the doubt and saying maybe it has something good to it. But from the traditional standpoint, the accepted means of transmission of knowledge are revelation and remembrance. Peer review didn't make the list. So it's not on the level of being the top tier knowledge. So it's some type of derivative knowledge. So I'll grant you it has certain fairly self-evident good attributes, but the way it gets implemented, it serves essentially as a bottleneck for ideas, which leads to a situation where you're essentially manufacturing consent to ideology, because it's like, oh, look, we have so much peer-reviewed science on the Big Bang, but it's like, is it actually scientific? And the answer is, upon closer inspection, well, no, it's not, which is why you're sort of stuck dealing with these excuses of like, well, it's not actually dealing with the beginning of the universe. It's a teeny microsecond after. It's like, okay, well, distinction without a difference, in a way.
Well, okay. So that's a lot. But like, if we just kind of take a step back, the concept of peer review has been around for a long time. It's been around a lot longer than 100 years. Now, it may not have there may have been some formal structure to that from an academic perspective in the last 100, 150 years. I would grant you that. But the aspect of having unbiased, anonymous evaluation of scientific evidence has assisted science, I think, to be able to, I think what you're saying is a bottleneck. I would say that it's helping to filter out the bad science. We want as much good science as possible and as little bad science.
How do you establish that it's good or bad, right? Someone has to come in and tell you, I'm coming in and telling you, and no one can recognize it. So that tells me there's not a good understanding of science on a fundamental level.
It's purely an evaluatory approach. We're going to have as many people as possible review this. Like, somebody's going to review it. It's going to get published. And then that publication or that work.
I understand the concept, but who decides what questions get asked?
The scientific community as a whole. We have a discipline.
There is no such thing. There is no such thing.
Pick a discipline. Pick any discipline. Cosmology. There are a set of cosmologists that publish, that read the publications, and that work in those areas. And so when something gets published, let's say it goes through a peer review process, and let's say it gets approved by 3 reviewers. And
you don't need to filibuster about a definition.
I'm not filibustering. I'm not filibustering.
You're not letting you. What are you asking me? The questions. You're already predicating all this on an existence of a body of research? Who
Yeah.
decides what questions are posed to the body of researchers
Look,
in the first place?
there's a community of people that are publishing in a particular area. So it's not just those reviewers. It's a large number of people that have published and that are reviewing those publications that are saying, John Doe published this work on cosmology and it got reviewed. It gets published in June. And guess what? Huge numbers of people read that. And numbers of people then write commentaries that say, guess what? That got published. That's bullshit. And here's why it's bullshit. And I'm going to publish on that. I'm going to show why this publication is wrong. That happens across many disciplines with many people. And that conglomerative process is a manner which we eliminate bad science. Bad articles that even get published then get shown to be bunk. They get shown to be, after they were published, they get shown that they aren't actually legitimate science. We want that.
I have a question. Do you think it's possible for science to operate without the mechanism that you're describing, that people read stuff that gets written? That's tautological.
It can function without that. I
don't think it can function without a
well.
mechanism of people reading the things and correcting the errors. It's not about whether the errors were read and corrected. That's a good thing. The question is, who is posing the questions? Who's framing the research in the first place, and how is it being framed? And when you only allow one way of framing the research, you are excluding all the other ways of framing the research.
We're not saying that.
What if you're wrong in how you're framing it?
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that there's only one
That's the
way
issue of peer review. But that's what peer review ends up being.
No, it's not. No, it's not. It absolutely is not. People come up with novel ideas that are completely against what all the scientists think. But if they are able to show that their research is legitimate and is backed up and supported with evidence, then that is a breakthrough in science. And guess what? The discipline changes. We have that happen all the time. It's not like everybody toes the line. There are oftentimes
you have a lot of faith in your religion, I see.
It's not a religion.
Secular religion doesn't usually work out too well because you have a very poor grasp on metaphysics.
When you refer to what I'm talking about as religion, it tells me that you're not actually a scientist, that you're lacking some of that scientific background in understanding what I'm talking about.
Science is about validated models that make predictions.
Well, it's not just about models, but that's one facet.
You want to say it's also about peer review. You have to prove that using science. And
I'm saying that peer review is just a process that evaluates science. It's a process for us to weed out the bad science.
Did you prove that using science, though?
Well, did I prove that using science?
It's the democracy fallacy. Did you?
It's not.
It is essentially democratizing information. Yes, it goes against the traditional teaching. So obviously, the result is going to be subpar.
There is a community aspect to it, but it is not like we're all voting and the people that all vote
it's not democratization at all. But except it's all a bunch of peers reviewing and publishing random people who are paid by God knows who.
Somebody could publish something, and the majority of scientists say, you know what, that's a great publication. And one person comes out and says, I think this is bunk, and I can actually prove it, and I have the evidence to show that, and I'm going to publish a paper that is countervailing to that paper. And guess what? That minds change. It has to do with being able to provide supportable scientific evidence around it. It just so happens that in a lot of these topics, large majorities of scientists all have similar ideas because they are all coming to the same conclusion on a particular topic, like climate change. I'm a climate change scientist. Like, that happens. There's a reason why a large number of scientists think that the climate is changing, that it's anthropogenic, because they're all looking at evidence and they're all evaluating that evidence separately, but they're coming to very similar conclusions. So
the conclusion I come to is that there's a lot of pollution, which companies don't want to pay for, so they shove the burden onto quote global warming, which justifies it being taxed to the masses, and people like you getting paid to shill this shit.
I'm shilling it.
That's what science. That's what you're getting paid to defend it. That's what science is.
I'm not getting paid. I'm not getting paid to defend it.
Predictable.
I'm not getting paid.
That's why I'm a scientist.
Nobody's paying me to write
in a way that makes it all make sense.
Nobody's paying me to write the publications that I write. Nobody's saying you've got to write these publications in that manner. Nobody's saying that. Nobody's telling me the way my
compensation for it.
I get paid, but I don't get
Yeah,
paid
exactly.
to.
You get
Well,
paid.
I have
You are
a
a shill.
job.
That is the definition of a shill. Everybody
No,
else in your field is a
no,
shill like you, and you're
no,
saying I'm supposed to trust you.
no.
I don't, because you're wrong
Listen to
about
you.
everything, and you don't understand what I'm saying, and you want to start to teach me about what peer review is, implying I don't want to know what it is.
You're-
You know, I worked in the field for 8 years, and I could have published
You
things,
worked
but
in,
guess what? I didn't, because
but
I
you
actually
haven't.
focused on the work that I had to do. I
But
did
you
the work I
haven't.
had to do. I didn't publish anything, but guess what? I was
Well,
accepted
then
as the
stop
world leader.
acting like that.
I
You
was
can
accepted as the
publish.
world leader to defend my position, because guess what? I actually got the job done, and I don't have peers. So how are you going to review my work?
So if
You
okay,
can't
so
tell
you
I'm
so you
right.
don't so you don't have
You want to
peers.
jump on. You don't even want to look at my ideas. You want to jump onto
You don't have-
meta-analysis that I didn't
what
pass
publications
peer
do you
review.
have? I can't even look at your ideas.
I have a blog with over 125 articles on it.
You
It's
have a
like
blog.
you're gonna laugh at that. It's like,
I
okay,
am.
you only want to read propaganda. Well, that's your problem.
Listen, the propaganda. Only person that's spewing out propaganda is you. I'm sorry to tell you that. You may not like the sound of that.
Yet I can find what you're saying in written format a fuck ton more than I can find what I'm saying in written format. So it would imply you're the one preaching propaganda.
My work is reviewed by other people. Is your work
Sure.
reviewed by other people?
It's all real. Yeah, it has
It is.
led people to make a scientific
Who's reviewed your
experiment,
work?
which, look, I put out a theory, and then in the future, my theory was validated by someone else's peer-reviewed experiment. So suck on that.
What theory? I'm honestly curious. Like that Universe Today blog that you posted.
Well, I have a blog, okay, and it has my theory explained on it, as well as several questions answered. And one of the predictions of my model, which I'll
Okay.
share right now, is that stars should form in the center of galaxies due to the high density, which I said on the show, which completely went over my opponent's head. Seemed like a very straightforward notion to me. So I predicted this. I said new stars will form in a maximally dense region. And guess what they were able to observe? Yeah, so the stuff they were able to observe, yeah, it did pass peer review. So I don't need to pass peer review.
So
I am
so-
right. I
okay.
don't have peers.
Okay, I just
so
want
here's your problem. The best scientists don't have peers. That's what your theory, that's what your approach can't contend with.
No, not at all.
It's the fallacy of
Not at all.
democracy.
I mean,
Reality does not function on a democratic principle.
For you to
it'd be
say
awesome
that you
if
don't
it
have
did,
peers, for you
because
to
then we
say,
could get it. For me
Look.
to state the truth is somehow offensive, right? It's like I've looked around. If I had peers, I'd know it by now.
if you're gonna say that you like, just think about this. Like, be like intellectually honest here. Like you're saying
being
that you
scientific
have no
about it.
peers. Nobody has the intellectual capabilities that you do. Is that what you're saying?
I haven't seen anyone else present a coherent unified field model.
And let me get this right. You have a bachelor's degree, but you have no postgraduate work.
I'm too smart.
And you have
to think
no
that would be worth
publications.
anything. I'm too smart to think that would be worth anything.
You're too smart for graduate school.
I realized before I would have been going to grad school that it was a waste of my time. So I went immediately into industry and became the world leader in
In what?
automatic speaker recognition analysis.
And the world leader in what? What was it again? I'm so sorry, I
Automatic
didn't- uh-huh.
speaker recognition analysis. Okay. I was asked to speak in front of everybody in the world that does this discipline to explain my method that my boss helped me come up with through other peer-reviewed scientific processes. And I'm willing to bet that this will be the accepted model in the future and not just random squiggly drawings by fake scientists as what was done in the past. So yeah, I'm setting standards. I'm actually showing people what science is, and you're saying, "Well, you know, peer review."
Like
I'm not going to waste my time. I could have done peer-reviewed stuff back when I had my job where I was a scientist. It was not worth my time. I had to do actual work. I had to solve cases. That's a fact. I didn't have time to peer. If it was worth me doing this peer review thing, it would be. I would be able to do it. I know for a fact whatever I say is going to get rejected because I don't accept their axioms du jour. They have axioms. If you don't publish within their axioms, they ignore you.
So if you were to
Do you deny this?
If you were to publish in this area, you're saying that they would reject you because of their biased nature. Is that what you're saying?
Who knows? Who knows? I have said many times, if somebody in this domain wants to publish and wants my help to expound the model, I'm more than happy to do that. I'm just not going to do that because I feel like these conversations are more beneficial for
It's
getting
called
people to
speaker
understand
recognition, speaker recognition analysis. Is that what you said the area is?
Well, there's a lot of different names for it, but it's speaker identification is the broad tent.
Is this like a computational type of model? I'm just curious.
Well, yeah, I can tell you all about it. It's actually super cool. So like we use GMM UBM that came out of the work done by Joseph Campbell at MIT. So he was like basically working with a whole bunch of servers. Like he had a room full of servers to do his GMM UBM, which is a Gaussian mixture model where you use a fuck ton of training data. So you're using a bunch of audio training data that is pre-labeled because it's like people who signed up to be like recorded on the phone or whatever through pre-planned conversations. So they use that data and basically reverse engineer the eigenvalues that are most, coherent with the solution, right? So it's like a approximation to a matrix diagonalization process. And it allows you to make what's called a background model, which is like your average speaker. So it's like all the data from all the speakers into one entity. And then every individual speaker is a vectorial distance from this central entity. Okay. And then we get results. So two recordings, you're going to get two recordings in, and then the system that's been developed by these scientists that I had nothing to do with, we just bought the product from the people who were selling it as a commercial model to law enforcement.
Okay.
Right? You're following me so far?
I think so. Somebody else developed. Somebody else.
So I think you can follow me.
I do machine learning, and I do natural language processing. I build convolutional neural networks. So I'm fairly knowledgeable.
Yeah,
in
so
the
we
mathematical
did have a neural
modalities.
net too. You understand the basic idea is that it's throwing it's like throwing the values through a super large processor to figure out what's most correlated, essentially. Would you describe it that way, or am I sort of missing something in the core idea with machine learning?
It depends. I mean, for something like a neural network, you have multiple layers. So you have a hidden layer, and there's a facet of backward propagation that you're using. But ultimately, you have a bunch of features. You're trying to transform the features in a manner that best represents your feature data set. And then you are doing some using some algorithm for a predictive quality or predictive test on that data. So, I mean, it sounds like this is when you said speaker recognition, I couldn't understand if like you're trying to discern between one speaker and another speaker. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's like imagine you're a police officer and then someone is murdered. Yeah. And then someone calls into a game show to be like, guess what? I did the murder. Da, 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 da. I got away with it. And then they managed to record it. Okay.
You want to be able to identify who that person is?
You want to know, is this unknown recording the same as this known person? That's one-to-one speaker comparison. That's what you get in the field, right? So that is what they really had no solution for. They were basically doing what are called spectrograms. So that's where it
sounds like waveform analysis.
The thing that's what it started out as. And the funny thing is, like, if you go on some movies, they have like these like fake machines that have spectrograms in them where it's like,
sure,
voice analysis compute, and then it's like beep boop beep, and then it comes up and it's like match. So in reality, it's not like that. You just get like a random drawing out of the various frequencies, and what happens is that people have these patterned frequencies, these subnodes of their voices that are supposed to line up in certain attributes, but there's a subjectivity to it. Like, I don't know if you've ever looked into the issues with confirmation bias coming out of fingerprint analysis.
Oh, no.
I don't know if there's been issues with that. Like, I had to be sort of current in these things at my job, so I'm aware that there have been issues with like bias, subjective bias. So there is a bit of that in there. But yeah, it's basically what we did was we created a database of another synthetic database of speakers. And I did that at Ottawa U, actually, because I knew people at Ottawa U, and like I was comfortable with Ottawa U. So I thought I wanted to help the community, basically. So we funded this project, which I'm sure was super boring for the people that we hired for it, but hopefully we pay them enough to make it worth it. But yeah, they basically had to sit there and record people yakking, and they had predetermined sentences, which were called the Harvard sentences, which are like meant to be phonetically balanced or whatever. And then we had them speak across 4 different modalities, because when you're in the field, you might get something on a cell phone, you might get something on a home phone, and these are essentially different modalities. So what we're looking to do is to calibrate the UBM relative to the different modalities. So we do that. And then what we would say is, okay, so my method that I came up with, which was based on another guy whose name I forget, and I apologize in advance that I'm ripping. I did not come up with the essential approach to this. All I did was implement it in MATLAB. But basically, we would take because you have the machine will just do an infinite number of speaker comparisons, and all it gives you pops out as a number, right? So you have to do statistical analysis on the numbers that come out. So you get your example where it's the unknown recording and a known recording, right? Because they'll bring the guy in for an interview and they'll have this sample of his voice or her. But anyway, so we compare the unknown speaker to the database of speakers. So we had a database, I think it was maybe even over 1,000 speakers. So out of those 1,000 speakers, we get the voice ID thing to tell us what are the most similar speakers to my speaker in my case. So I get the 20 most similar speakers and I figure out what the machine tells me for comparisons between their voices. And so 20 versus 20. And that generates a statistical distribution on which I can plot the point of the unknown from the case and say, in the total distribution, it goes here, and therefore we would say that it's more on the side, more likely that it's the same person, more likely that it's not the same person. We didn't give match or non-match. It was confidence intervals.
Sure.
So we had to also come up with confidence intervals. So yeah, because I was able to get that method working and up to a court standard. Yeah, I was asked to speak about it there, and I never published on it because it's just I don't have time. And I would need support. I would literally need somebody to just do it for me and for me to rubber stamp it because I'm too busy doing actual science. But not that I don't respect the idea of being anal retentive about the mistakes people have made in the interpretations. But at some point, you have to acknowledge that the metaphysical interpretation of science is equally important as the physical interpretation of science. And what's happening through peer review is that the metaphysics is becoming unquestioned and rigid. And people are becoming unable to think outside of those metaphysics and contemplate whether a different metaphysics may actually be scientifically superior. We can establish whether metaphysics are scientifically superior via something called the least action principle. We shouldn't be thinking any harder about things. We should be getting to the answer in the simplest way possible, because we know that even the simplest way possible is not going to be that simple. It's not. It takes a while to learn math and stuff, doesn't it? I mean, who is really good at this stuff? The people this probably better than anybody. You're in machine learning. They're not experts at math. They have to. That's why they defer to the machine, right?
Well, I mean, we build mathematical models. I mean, we construct algorithms that we then use in machine learning processes. And so certainly I think what you were describing, with what you were talking about, has facets of kind of a supervised training model, if you know what that means. Are you familiar with supervised learning or unsupervised learning or reinforcement learning or anything like that? Supervised learning
that would be done before I work with it, because by the time I get it, it's already good to go, because there's a company that actually makes it.
You were using the model.
The intention is that somebody who worked at a police station could use it theoretically, but it didn't end up getting used by anybody at a police station. We were 4 of us in a lab, right, for the entire country.
But think about this. And I want to have I'm not trying to attack you. I'm not doing anything. I'm just trying to be straightforward about how my perspectives on science, and I'm not questioning your work, etc. However, I will say that what you just described as an example, these guys at MIT, they built this mixture model. They trained the model. They they hyper-tuned the model. They evaluated it with holdout data to see how accurate they could get it. They did feature transformation. They did all this shit.
The most important thing that they did was to change and to only use, it's like a reduction model, right? So you have, let's say, 1 million calculations, and then you carry them all out, and you only take the 100 most correlated ones.
You know what?
You can keep doing that. I think it's called pruning. That could I could be wrong on the actual technical term, but basically, you prune until pruning doesn't. You prune until you reach the eigenstates, i.e., you prune until pruning doesn't change the accuracy anymore until you reach the solid. What is it? The steady state.
Typically, pruning is done in decision trees, so random forest, which is an ensembled approach to decision trees. Like the concept of pruning is typically is done in that capacity, but you may be referring to something called dimensionality reduction, where they're reducing the dimension of variables down, and you're talking about eigenvectors and eigenvalues. Like obviously, like you're probably familiar with something like principal components. You've ever heard of principal components?
That is one of the ways that they did it, was through, they would always publish, like the MIT guys would always publish stuff, and like, God bless them for doing that. But when they published, it was always like, I don't want to say it was almost insulting in how sparse it was, but somebody who wasn't familiar with the material, there's no way they'd be able to know what the hell they were talking about. But they did put some stuff out. Principal component analysis. There's another one too. I vector decomposition. It's basically the idea that you have this huge matrix, and then you want to find the eigenvalues of the matrix. You want to find the things you multiply the initial coordinates by that are maximally correlated to the answers you already know are true. So Correct. That's what the thing that's important with machine learning is that it's predicated on a set of data for which the truth values are already known.
Well, some machine learning, not all machine learning, because there is a facet of unsupervised learning where you actually don't know. But you are correct in that respect, and certainly, like with a
you're totally right. It's totally right. Like
I'm not disagreeing
in what
with
we
you.
did. In what I'm just saying, what I meant, what I should have said is, in our particular application, it was never unsupervised, because that would be considered something that would be hard to defend in court. Where it's good for scientists to be pushing that boundary forward. But if you're going to go to the court, because like the court standard versus the science standard, they're different standards. And it's like, I'm not trying to shit on your discipline.
I know you're not.
Like the reality is, I wouldn't be able to do what I do without what other people have done before me. So just because there's some disagreements doesn't mean that broad strokes there weren't a lot of victories, because like, as people are incessantly pointing out in the chat, like all these achievements of this paradigm, that what I call materialist reductionist, of what has become of Western science, it did yield a lot of really great things. Like calculus, like you could argue we may never have come up with calculus if it weren't for Christianity. I'm not saying I'm going to take that position right now. I'm not saying I'm going to troll you with this baitish position. I'm just saying that it might be true. And scientifically, we have to sort of allow, like I'm really trying to just teach about the philosophy of science. We have to allow for the possibility that that's true, or in some way going to inform the greater picture of the truth. But yeah.
I am totally, obviously, science is provisional. Science is always about like, coming to new conclusions on positions. I absolutely agree with that. But just to kind of wrap up what we were talking about. With the modeling piece, the only thing I would say, and I'm not attacking you. Maybe this is just like a word of caution, where you were saying that nobody is your peer. Like, as an example, like those guys at MIT developed that model, and you implemented the model and worked with the model. But I'm imagining like they have a huge amount of knowledge, those people.
I'm not their peer either, though, right? I am not their peer either, because they have a specialized domain of expertise that I could never rival. So I would want to defer to their expertise. I did defer to their expertise. I was happy to do it. To me, that's not peer review. That's deferring to the expertise of a person who I'm not his peer in speaker comparison. He is fucking amazing in speaker comparison. Like, this is the kind of person who like goes home and thinks about this shit, right? Like, you could tell when you meet him, like every single thing, even in the lunch breaks. Right?
Imagine, like, I mean,
talking about voice ID. It's great.
This is like, and again, as a aspect of the debate, the thing that kept coming to me is just like you were saying, there are people that they eat and live and breathe this research, and they've done it for years and years and years. And I don't want to do a disservice to them, because those people have a huge amount of knowledge. I mean, I would just encourage you. I mean, I know that you have a viewpoint and you have a perspective. What would it hurt to consider some of the experts in these particular areas of which you have this model that you've been working with?
I have throughout my 20s. All I did throughout my 20s was quote unquote peer review. I just read everything I could find. What I was looking for were the things that were best substantiated through science. but I wasn't looking for a metaphysical explanation. I was looking for what is science telling us and what are we most sure is real and not an artifact of experimentation, right? You're familiar with this idea of artifacts,
Sure.
effects that are derivative from the measurement device as opposed to the system under observation. And it becomes increasingly difficult to deal with artifacting when you get down to the limit, with what they call the quantum limit. Because if you're zooming in, and zooming in is an active process that you have to do multiple times with the wrong metaphysical presumptions, you're accumulating the error as you recurse down. So yeah, that's what I was saying, is that I did look at the science, I did look at the evidence, and I did keep in my theories that other people came up with, because my goal was to put it all in the language of Occidental science so that somebody who actually wanted to learn it could theoretically learn it. And so far, I've only really had to change one word, which is wave function is not a function because the real number line isn't real. Basically, like, you can't predicate stuff on non-existent stuff, and the real number line can be proven not to exist. But so I call it a waveform instead of a wave function. But other than that, what I'm saying has precedent in peer-reviewed physics.
I mean,
but
the
interpretations,
why not submit this work?
The metaphysical interpretations are different because I'm coming at it from a non-dualist or a qualified dualism rather than a materialist reductionism, which is like a bottom-up, graduated, climbing the pile of knowledge as opposed to descending from the heavens of knowledge model.
Yeah, I mean, this is metaphysics is not my area, so I don't even claim to understand.
Nobody does.
Aspects,
Do not trust people who tell you that they understand metaphysics. It's more challenge. It's like real philosophy, right? Because you're talking about grounding your suppositions to do physics. Like, for example, everything can be grounded in the notion of a particle. So to ground everything in the construct of a particle, that's a metaphysical choice. Because if we go to the physical side, what evidence do we have really strong enough evidence for the existence of particles to ground our observations in particles themselves? Like, look around you. Do you actually see any particles? Like, what do you actually, can you describe what you see? Does any of it look like a particle?
I mean, are you questioning that particles exist?
What's the best evidence for particles existing?
I mean, I don't know, but I mean,
that's the thing. Like, there isn't any. There is no good evidence for particles existing.
But you saying that doesn't necessarily mean that that's the case. I mean,
maybe not, but you could disprove me, right? If you had better evidence to substantiate a particle, you could just present it.
But if you went out and did an expansive literature review, would that literature support your position or not?
Well, they may not have framed the question that way, because very rarely in physics do we question our metaphysical assumptions. And most physicists are unable to even ask that question because they've just accepted the tacit axioms of the Cartesian frame, right? So Cartesianism, by invoking orthogonality between space and time, accepts a tacit metaphysics of linear algebra. Linear algebra, metaphysics, you can think of it as like a list of axioms. You know how you need axioms to do linear algebra? The linear algebra essentially doesn't make sense without axioms. Well, what if there were different axioms you would use? What if they gave you better results? What are you looking at? You seem to be reading something.
That I need axioms to do linear algebra and like matrix math.
You can look at axioms of a vector space if you want to see if you want to actually see the list. I want to say it's 10, but you mean it's like one of those.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. Like, you mean like if you're looking at like spectral decomposition or singular value decomposition, that there's like semi-positive aspect. Like there are differing so-called axioms that are associated with vectors that need to be in place in order for you to perform linear algebra calculations. Okay, yeah.
And that's true on an even more foundational level, in the sense that no assertion containing information can be made without axioms.
Okay, but
There's a presuppositional nature to assertions.
I knew you were going to say presuppositionalism or presuppositionalist.
It's a word that just seems to be like in vogue right now. It just seems to be like a trend of people using it. And I realized, I was like asking them on Amy Newman, I'm like, what do they mean when they say that? And they're like, oh, it's the Christian presuppositionalism of the Bible. I'm like, okay, guess I'll have to, take that word back.
Do you know
I literally just learned who he was because I was researching Leo Phileas in preparation for the debate, and I found this Darth Dawkins thing, and I was like, man, this is rough. And then I found the Amy Newman Darth Dawkins one, and it was even rougher. Like, this guy is, I don't know what his grift is, but man.
Somebody's in the chat saying I won't talk about CO2 emissions. Dude, this isn't like a climate debate. I don't know what somebody's trying to call me out for climate discussions.
I think the best argument you can make in support of problems is that we essentially don't know when the oceanic buffer will break. And if you just explain the notion of a buffered system, that it works and until it doesn't, right? If we lose the oceanic buffer due to dissolved CO2, we're going to be in a world of trouble, right?
I mean, there's certainly thresholds that that passing those thresholds has considerable effects to natural systems, biological systems, atmospheric systems. There are some people that say that we've already passed some of those thresholds, whether like we're talking about like oceanic changes, whether we're talking about like atmospheric circulation aspects, but there are multiple systems that are all interacting, and so but the bottom line is that we know that increased CO2 based on the energy balance of the planet has an effect which heats up our planet. I could talk more about that.
Can I tell you about my anarchist professor who denied global warming on the
Sure.
No, he I don't know if he per se denied global warming, but he denied the causality of what you're referencing right now. And he said that the CO2 went down, or wait, what are they? They're saying the CO2 goes up, which causes the temperature to go up, and he's saying that it was the temperature going up that caused the CO2 to go up.
Oh yeah, that's a common misconception.
And you know what was so hilarious? I just want to tell you one more thing about him, and you can keep going. But before I forget, it was so freaking hilarious. Like, he was an anarchist, and he like wanted to break us free of the chains of like whatever, and so he gave everybody an automatic A+ in quantum mechanics class,
Sweet.
and he ended up getting fired. Yeah, unceremoniously. Anyway. Go ahead.
No, it's all good. I mean the aspect of temperature preceding CO2 increases is kind of like it's like you know what Snopes is? It's a common thing that is put out by climate denialists.
Like the way that Christians try to chip away at science in the interest of justifying their mythology type thing, like a bad faith.
I mean, one thing I would say is that like I also do some work in aspects of cognitive dissonance, in particularly around science topics like climate science, vaccines, people's viewpoints on very complicated topics, like topics that are very diffuse. Climate change, literally and figuratively, is a diffuse topic. It's very difficult to think about it and think about all the moving parts that may result in it. And there's a lot of gaps where people can say, but what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And there's an aspect of
I just thought of one: grand solar minimum.
Yeah. Like, what do you mean?
That's one of those things. That's one of those things that people cite as being more causative in the cycle than the increased CO2. Because the idea with global warming is increased CO2 leading to higher temperatures.
Sure.
Which leads to devastation. Yeah, and then the question is whether that's the primary causal mechanism. My main concern, I'll be honest with you, is the screwing up the ocean buffer. And for more CO2, because I don't think anybody can argue that there's CO2 being put in the atmosphere that wouldn't otherwise be there due to human activities. I mean, just to put it to what people can actually agree on.
We can break down like the components that make the Earth warm up. I mean, like the most classic ones are greenhouse gases, solar radiation, and albedo, like the reflectivity of the planet. And there are other aspects that affect that, things like orbital cycling, chemical weathering. But ultimately, the main factors are how much sun we're getting, how reflective the planet is, and how much, what our atmosphere is composed of, which will result in preventing what's called long wave radiation from escaping the planet. Because like the sun comes in and it's a short wave radiation, so it's got a short wavelength. It hits something, hits the earth, hits clouds, they get absorbed into heat, and then that heat comes off as long wave radiation. And that long wave radiation, it's a longer wavelength. So the things in the atmosphere block that long wave radiation. And it just so happens that CO2, nitrogen, those things are CO2 primarily, and nitrogen, CH4 are at a wavelength that they happen to be at the location where they block that long wave radiation. And so that's what changes the energy balance of the planet. And there are other things like, is the planet closer to the sun? Is the angle of the rotation of the earth different? Is it wobbling? All those just affect how much sunlight we get. But anyways, anytime anybody talks to you about those, it's like, it's sun, reflection, atmospheric gases. So anyway,
what about the standing wave?
What do you mean?
Well, like if there's photons being reflected off the moon and the earth, doesn't that predict a standing wave? It's the thing that you know what aurora borealis is?
Sure.
There has to be an unperturbed field, which then becomes perturbed. So it's the thing that's there and is made evident by the fact that aurora borealis happens. So there's a standing field. Isn't that what deflects the radiation?
Well, I mean, you're
saying it's deflected by particulates in the atmosphere. That seems
no.
strange.
I'm saying the like reflectivity, albedo, like the solar radiation can be reflected, obviously, and the more that is reflected, that's less heat that's getting absorbed. So if there's like a theory called snowball Earth, like if the Earth was completely covered in snow and all the sunlight was being reflected off the earth, how would the earth ever heat up to melt the snow? And the answer to that is we have things like we have other things other than the albedo and the amount of sunlight we are receiving. We have chemical weathering, we have greenhouse gases in the atmosphere that can come from other places other than humans. And that can change the balance of that energy balance. It can slightly change it. And then over time, that change slowly builds and builds and builds, and that gets us out of a snowball Earth. But I mean, I don't know anything about like the standing wave aspect. Sorry if I just don't know anything about that. So
yeah, my whole model is basically based on light, and it predicts stuff like your heart beating, and like basically predicts everything. And it's probably hard for people to accept that, but yeah, it's like a light-centric model. So the light is actually this like most important thing of it, because it is actually how it works. It's just really hard to see why, because it's like the heart is so, it's near and dear to us. So, oh my God, we have somebody else to join the stream.
Oh, James.
It's not that I don't love talking to you, Jason. I just my own preference is like 3 to 4 to 5 people in a chill vibe.
Yeah,
so
I've just been enjoying the conversation you guys have been having, the back and forth. I think it's really interesting. What's that, Jen?
I just want to say I feel like super honored that super skeptical atheists gave me a chance. So let me just, not just you, Jason, everybody. I know Amy is a hard.
I learned
We're
that
from
to
the
listening to new ideas.
I learned from the dark.
I think we like new ideas, new things. We're not closed-minded at all to that. But Jen, I did just want to give you a congratulations to the newest 1,000 subscriber channel on YouTube.
Woo-hoo! Thank you. Yeah,
there you go.
I really appreciate it, guys.
I'm glad we could do a small part to help getting your channel out there. So
yeah, finding you guys has been awesome, because like I've been trying to get into basically this, like a debate community, and I've tried to go around various communities and like they have their little pet projects and drama stuff. Is like, you do you, but like I'm in this for the ideas, and it is awesome to meet new people and to learn about the ideas that have like impacted their life. Like obviously Jason's had a similar experience with me with falling in love with science, because it just really is such a fun thing to share.
Totally. Yeah. And
Jason's a true science advocate, so he's passionate. Yeah.
And I would just, I don't know if I said this before, but like I like having honest, straightforward, but like cordial discussion. I didn't come on here to cause any flack, and so I appreciate, again, the opportunity to chat with you. And so I'm obviously willing. I always want to be open-minded and willing to consider people's ideas.
Yeah, no process ever devised by humans is going to be perfect. There's always going to be times where things break down or things don't work right, but the scientific method and peer review is pretty much the best ways we've ever determined to be able to, filter out what's good ideas, bad ideas, and filter out the biases that we all have, because we all go into these experiments and we all look at things. We all have biases. We all have our intuition about things, and science really tries to strip all that away, strip away our bias, our intuition, so we can actually see what's really happening. And it's the best we've ever came up with so far.
Yeah, no, Jen might disagree somewhat.
She might.
I mean, I agree with you, obviously, James, but I would also, like, I acknowledge, like I said before, there are certainly issues with peer review. There can be biased reviewers. I can tell you as an example, I have submitted papers where by looking at the reviews, I got the sense that the person, or there was a person or persons that was reviewing my work that was publishing in the same area and that may have been competing on a similar grant. And so there could have been an incentive for them to like give me a bad review, because that, similarly, like with grants, like you submit a grants are reviewed by a grant committee. And oftentimes people on that committee are competing for the same grants from those same people, because they're on the committee because they have knowledge of that area. So
conflicts of interest pop up.
Yeah. But you can imagine, like, if you're submitting let's say you're submitting for a grant and it's like a climate change, like oceanic evaluations of CO2, and you submitting an NSF grant, and the committee is made up of like 20 people. Well, the people on that committee are going to be knowledgeable in that area, and they may very well be competing with you on other grants, and their research is very similar. And but just by reading your work, like, cause it's anonymized, they don't know who it is, but they can, they can read into it. They're like, I know this is so-and-so. And
you read enough papers, you can kind of tell people's writing style.
Yeah, totally.
How they,
totally. So there could be those issues where people are like making decisions that are based on their own self-interests. I acknowledge that, that's the case. But on the other hand, obviously, I think from a higher level, conceptually, I think peer review works with all its warts and all.
It should just be, they could minimize that with like the number of reviewers that they have. Like if it's a large enough number, then just one negative review wouldn't exactly torpedo a project. It would just be, I guess it depends on how many people, how they're set up, how many people review a paper.
There's the issue of like, what if there's just different opinions as to the interpretation? Like, I feel like I keep repeating this metaphysical interpretation thing. What if there's two different metaphysical interpretations that are in competition with each other? Who decides which one is right?
Okay. I mean, I think it's a valid question. I mean, I'm not saying that
I'll grant you it has some strengths. I'm not saying that it is 100% crap and has, I'm trying to say it's like a mixed bag. And I'm trying to get people to think about the authority of assertions, because it comes down to, are you thinking independently, or are you just taking everything on face value? So you have to sort of have an internal check and balance of your own beliefs with external beliefs, or you're not going to have a compass for reality.
I mean, this happens though. Like we have competing theories in different disciplines, and people and so like.
But we don't have competing metaphysics. They're all the same metaphysics.
Well, really?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I can't speak to it, but I would think that there are competing metaphysics.
No, not since the 1920s. Yes, before, but not after. Like if you go back as far as Boltzmann, yes. Boltzmann was ridiculed, attacked, vilified because his metaphysics didn't line up with the orthodox metaphysics. So they basically harassed him, and it led to his suicide, which I think is ultra sad, given what he has given us and how much in the modern day his work is important, like entropy. He was the first one to really conceptualize that. Yet in his time, it was indeed a metaphysical interpretation, because nobody who went against him would have disagreed upon the broad strokes interpretation of what science was. They were disagreeing on how to interpret the things that they were measuring. That's metaphysical.
Yeah, I've told Christians before they worship basically a Boltzmann's brain. Like
I think I remember you saying that, and I was like, what does he mean by that? Because I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that, but maybe I kind of feel slightly the vibe of what you're saying.
It's a Boltzmann brain is just like a theoretical brain that just pops out of into existence from the quantum state. It's just a random fluctuation of quantum things, I guess. I don't know the right term for it, but it comes fully loaded with all these memories and everything, and eventually learns how to manipulate matter and energy, and infinity later decides to make a universe. You know?
I swear to God, some of these topics, like I am just clueless on. Like I'll be honest with you.
Yeah.
Well,
like
you have to learn how to hear them and what it is that's being said. You have to learn to think of it metaphysically, not just physically. It's like, are we accepting that particles are the fundamental thing? Or are we accepting that maybe there's something else more fundamental? And if there is, what is it?
I mean, I can understand that. I mean, but
mass. Why not just all agree that mass is the most fundamental thing? We won't say anything metaphysically about mass, but we'll agree. I look around, I see some massive shit. It seems to be doing a lot. Let's just axiomatize that.
I mean, okay, so forgive me, but like I don't like while you guys were talking about this, I'm like, do I even know what the appropriate definition of metaphysics is? And
there are very few people who truly understand it, because most people who employ the term are doing what's called Christian apologetics, aka Darth dipshit. Okay, we all know what's going on. But this is apologetics, so it's basically rhetoric. It's something that sounds smart. Sophistry, I think they call it. And it's like, it sounds really smart, but it's actually not. You're not going to get a clear answer from them. You are not going to come away from that understanding generally what metaphysics is in your day-to-day life. But
yeah, I mean,
if I could get it across, it's just like in your thought process, what's the most fundamental thing? Where do you start off presuppositionally? People who do science, most people, I would argue, is causality. You are accepting that we are in an essentially ordered universe, and that it starts off with causes and ends with effects. And the thing that separates causes from their effects is time.
Yeah. I mean, I did watch an interesting
piece.
Well,
would you agree that that's what science believes?
Generally,
and that's not a physical statement. That's like before you even get to physical. That's how you're interpreting physical.
You know, whenever I hear people, like as an example, you know, you hear like William Lane Craig do his cosmological argument. They talk about infinite regress and like everything that, what is it?
Yeah,
everything
it's goofy. It's fucking goofy, right? It's like everything that it's goofy. It's a complete
everything that has
fallacy.
All things have a
fallacy.
cause.
It's saying that it's actually a self-contradictory fallacy. Like it's saying the original argument was that this is how this argument was originally phrased by the Platonists. Okay, because we live in a causal universe, there must exist an uncaused first mover.
Sure,
because it is the source of all this causality. It is the thing in which the causality is grounded. And then these philosophers would try to inquire into the nature of the supreme causality, right? Which they called the monad. This got remanufactured to be yada, 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 causality, regression, yada, yada, God. Can you see how it's sort of like that?
Sounds like John Maddox.
But you can see that like this is residual, what you call Platonism or Aristotelianism. It's like a method of structuring arguments that is taken from the Greeks to justify this biblical God. But it's not actually understanding what the argument is, because the argument is itself an argument for an uncaused first cause.
Yeah,
Which they say that that's God, basically. So they're basically shifting the universe onto God. They're saying, well, it's not the universe that's the first cause, it's God.
Depending
That's
upon the
not correct. That's bad logic, right? Isn't it? That's
And that God doesn't need a cause. That's a special pleading, but they just assert that he doesn't.
Well, it's no difference than the argument that I'm making, but I'm not invoking an extra supernatural deity to do it. I'm just saying the mass in the universe is uncaused. That's the same thing as saying God is uncaused and made the universe. I'm just taking out this panentheistic being.
You just like a steady state universe. Is that what you're advocating for?
It's yeah, it is steady state, but it's quantized steady state. So there are quantum events which cause the system to rearrange itself in a manner that is not a linear deformation from its origin, because quantum state transitions are nonlinear. So when the quantum state transitions aren't happening, it's steady state. And then when they are happening, there's a switch. It's like flipping a switch. And then you go from one configuration to the other, upon which you immediately resume the continuity. That's why we have this like large scale. You have to agree, it's a pretty darn regular universe. It's not like you can look up in the sky and there's like, you know, some random huge thing on one end that looks completely different from the other end. They call it isotropic, right? That's one of the qualities of the universe, is its isotropy. Like the average density of galaxies being the same in all directions. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, have you? I see. I don't know how you say the guy's name. Kaifi in the chat was mentioning about Sean Carroll. I don't know if you've listened to any of his stuff online or read any of his work.
What does he talk about?
Sean Carroll. He has a lot of work on causality. He wrote a paper on the arrow of time. So he has he's an astrophysicist. He has a lot of research around like the beginnings of the universe and the differing like alternative models that revolve around the inflation theory model. And again, he has a lot of good work on like causality. And like what does causality actually mean? How does it change as we go backwards in time? Its relationships to time. I find his lectures to be very accessible. And so if you haven't listened to him, check him out. I think he's got some good stuff.
I have heard some of his stuff before,
yeah.
And I find it very interesting. You know, you wonder like, why is the speed of light the speed of? Why would there be a maximum speed limit that anything could travel?
Oh my God, I think
he talks about that
all the time. Do you guys ever see Theoria Apoplastis? I'm probably not pronouncing that right, but it's a YouTube channel. The guy's name is Ken, I think, and he talks about this stuff from a magnetic perspective. Yeah, he has his whole little pet theory. Like, I don't know if I agree with it, but if you're into that stuff about why is the speed of light constant,
well,
he does go into that.
It's because, I mean, if you follow like the work of Sean Carroll and people like that the speed of light is actually the speed of causality.
Yeah.
Like nothing can happen faster than that because causality would
poetic. That is
really
so
break down.
poetic.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't understand the physics of it. I'm not a physicist, but apparently that they have equations that make it work. You'll call it a magical, or what's that term you use, Jen, for the magical math or?
Mathemagic. It's the speed of undifferentiated causality, but causality itself doesn't it's the maximum speed of differentiated causality and the speed of causality. So yeah, there is something about it that has to do with distances, right? So you have to be careful because Light doesn't exist everywhere. It only arises in places where distances are well defined. What makes a distance well defined? Well, it has to have a certain resolution to the matter. It needs to be at a high enough energy state to be able to release the light, because that's essentially all that's happening. It's mass losing light and gaining light, and losing light and gaining light. And because that's all it is, and because there's so much of it going on, it's really hard to tease it out that that's all it is. Looks like we have somebody else here who is hopefully not a troll. Things have been good so far, so hopefully number 4 is lucky number 4 in leaf clover and not a troll.
Hello, can you hear me?
You're not a troll, are you?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. No, I'm not a troll. Oh, sorry. I was trying to get everything connected, make this count.
Your
How you guys
audio is
doing
not
tonight?
perfect. Your audio is not perfect. It's like basically a telephone line quality, but that's okay. We could definitely work with it. We're all doing great. Thanks for joining. And what are your thoughts on what we've been talking about or the debate? See, I'm channeling Amy Newman there, trying to get better at spokespersonship. Go ahead.
Right. Amy Newman. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely enjoyed the last, probably dozen streams that you guys have done. They were really fascinating. I definitely saw a lot of correlations with your young gentleman the other night who mentioned Ken Wheeler and his work. And I definitely see a lot of correlations. I hope that one day you guys will be able to speak. I think it'd be fascinating, but that's probably pretty hard to set up. But it
would just be me like grading his work like it was a homework assignment. Trust me, you may think that it would be good, but it would be cringy. Like it would. I'm sorry. Like it would just be like. I don't even want to say it. Like because like I want everybody to be happy. Damn it. I can't debate every Ken Wheeler, and it wouldn't look good if I did, because his thing doesn't rise to the level of science. Like I only want to debate people that their thing rises to level of science. His is a description. I'm glad if it's helped people come to deeper realizations about life, but I've made a decision to contain my teachings to the domain of science because I feel that's where I'm most needed at this point in time. So nothing against him.
So oh no, it's okay. I just
personally, or any of his followers, pretty well. Or any of his followers. Like, I'm glad that it's brought you good things. It's just like the people I'm trying to convince is like James, is like Jason. Are they going to be convinced by Ken Wheeler? Only if it rises to a scientific standard. And even then, maybe not. It's still going to be a good chunk of time spent where we go back and forth and there's a heavy amount of skepticism. And that's great, actually. I love skepticism. I can't say that enough, because the same thing that makes skepticism, the thing underlying skepticism is sort of like a really strong, like, what's the word? Stubbornness. And stubbornness could be really good because that's what gives you tenacity to continue on your beliefs when things are challenging.
I would agree. I think that anchoring yourself in the most solid foundation would be advantageous to anyone. Oh, yeah. It's just I've noticed that a lot of others have been led here from probably running into him and then running into you.
I got added.
So.
It was so fucking random. Like, I swear, I got added to that group completely randomly. Like, you ever been rape added to a group?
No. I've
Jason knows what I'm talking about. He's got that hair. I guarantee he's been rape added to groups. It's like you just wake up one day, it's like, I didn't know I was meant to join these 10 groups. But yeah, I got put in by a guy who later got kicked out of the group. So I feel kind of bad because there's like this huge long explanation of like, well, this guy was causing problems, blah, blah, blah. So we eventually had to just tell him to leave the group, blah, blah. I was like, ooh, he's the one who rape added me to this group. I guess I should I'll stay here. If somebody kicks me out, I'll just be like, okay, that was what was intended to happen. But so far it seems like there's actually a lot of cool people in the group. All that to say, there are some actually decent, awesome, cool people. And I subbed to the one guy, Footnotes to Plato. I don't know if you know him from that group or if you're even in that group, but it's like an adjacent to Ken Wheeler. And I love their conversations. I think it's great that they're going in that direction because it's just like a free form sort of big questions sort of, I don't want to say roundabout in the good way.
Big questions, little answers.
Can you hear me all right?
We hear you.
Yeah. To back on topic, I guess I'd say that I was curious that you're probably aware that I think it's probably a misconception. In segmentation, right, the idea of it, of, particulating things into different orders, that somehow makes things confusing for most people. It's useful on one level,
we should be doing that. No, we should be hierarchizing. We should be seeking we should be all seeking the supreme hierarchy without making any subjective suppositions about it. That's how you purify your soul. You want the hierarchy, but you also accept that as a flawed human, you don't necessarily get it on the first try, but you admit that it's there, and over time it becomes revealed to you. That's how it works.
Yes.
You don't get
segmentation
to
is
the answer.
kind of
And that's what he's doing. He's saying like, oh, there's all these levels. There's green, there's orange. And what that's going to do for some people is give them a false sense of knowingness, which is going to lead to the type of behavior that with the guy that just left the group, right, and did the Cope video about it. Like, I don't want to go into drama or whatever, but I saw that happened.
I got you. That's what I noticed. Is that
Jason, purify my soul.
It's useful, but it's deceptive. Like the idea of free will, right? Kind of that we experience it, but it's not necessarily the truth, right? It's more of a, I suppose,
Did anybody
an amalgam.
Did anybody see the Sam Harris conversation with Lex Fridman, the last one that was up on the Lex Fridman channel? They go into free will. It's really interesting. Just the way he phrases it, because I think he actually kind of changed his mind, or his opinion got more like complex or whatever. But the way he goes into it, he said that the illusion of free will is an illusion. I was like,
but it's still an experience, right? I mean, it still exists as an experience, even if it's.
We have two conflicting hypotheses, which is actually free will is actually a good way to go into structured hierarchy and authority and what that really means, right? Because we have extremely compelling evidence on both sides. We have the fact that we can't travel backwards in time suggests some degree of determination. Now, we also have a guaranteed that we don't live in a purely deterministic universe because of things like the slit experiments. So that's called bounding the problem. You bound it at both ends. On the one hand, we can't go back in time. That is a fact. On the other hand, we know for a fact we don't live in a purely deterministic universe because we can't know where the electron's going to go in advance of the slit experiment. So do you see how those are almost seeming like for somebody who was completely uninitiated that they'd be contradictory things?
Yeah.
But we can reconcile.
I definitely would.
They're both true. They're both true. It's just that they seem like they're incompatible when you don't actually see the metaphysics behind them. Just because the universe is governed by causality doesn't mean that there isn't a plurality to that causality, in the sense that you aren't truly predetermined, in the sense that you can choose out of all the things that pre-exist inside you. You can choose which one you're going to be going with. Like if you make the intention to, even something as simple as choosing clothes, you look at all of your clothes and you choose one. And there is an element of, if not absolute freedom, then relative freedom. And I call that, there is already an existing concept for that. It's called thermodynamic degrees of freedom. And that has to do with how many different microstates exist within a system. And from that framework, we can.
How would we make that choice? I mean, if we break it down, like, what are we attempting to follow the path of least resistance when we make choices, like thinking about how our social, how people will measure us socially.
The fact that we have any conception, the fact that we have any conception of choice at all means that it's not 100% path of least resistance. Path of least resistance is what you get if you do nothing. But if you work intentionality into it to try to not archive, sorry, but like analyze who you are and learn about yourself more, and the aspects of yourself that you don't like, and to recognize them such as to prevent them from becoming something that you channel in the future, you are taking an active process in developing your own mind. You can definitely do that.
Yes, but
it's not
are we also trying to follow the? Sorry, go ahead.
Just to come back to the path least resistance, like, you're still obeying causality by having choices, even though those choices can't be retroactively changed. But in terms of path of least resistance, that is a tendency for unimpeded systems. If you change the system, if you put energy into the system, it'll still be following a path of least resistance, but the way to think of it is it's a least action path. It's called the principle.
Does human
of
perception
least
still follow
action.
this? No.
It's called the principle of least action. It does follow it, but there are multiple states which would be able to have their own relative least action path. So you can start with just one mind state, and then it turns over time you develop 2 mind states, 3, 4, 5. You have the ability to go between them and to like force yourself to stay focused on one, which then causes a feedback loop to imprint that impression on your subconscious to make it more likely for you to focus on that thing subconsciously than last time. I hope that wasn't too much of, I hope that answered your question. Like what even was the question again?
Just relating, like, you know, your summations of entropy, right, and trying to find the least or the least energetic state.
Yeah, so
right?
yes,
And how that kind of applies
yes,
to
every
all
system,
facets of reality.
Every system will obey the minimum or the least action principle. Every system will obey it, but through the force of will, you can change which least action path is followed. You have a choice. You don't just have one universal least action path. You have a plethora, and which ones are activated depends on what you do with your own will. So that's basically, I think that's sort of how the quote impression or illusion of free will works. It's degrees of freedom, not absolute freedom. I don't think you're ever going to get rid of this notion. Even if we said categorically, it's not real, everything's predetermined, I just don't think people would let it go. I think it's kind of like God. It's just one of those things that even if it's not real, or we could prove or convince ourselves it's not real, it keeps popping up as some sort of like thing that we almost need as like a coping device.
Well, it's a progression, right? Because we can imagine that at some point it didn't exist, at least that realization, and now it does. So it is an evolution of sorts. To what ends?
Yeah, exactly. And then the metaphysics comes in to answer the question of what is the ultimate origin of the realization? That's where depending on your metaphysics, you get radically different answers.
I would agree.
That's where we're having problems.
Yeah.
Is because people are assuming things are arising internally, but they're actually arising externally. Because there is no such thing as internally, right?
Parroting is very common. I find that is one of the more prolific dynamics that seem to be in play, right? Not a whole lot of creative thought, but
not just parroting. It's not just parroting. People can have realizations where it's like a light switch getting turned on, right? That's not parroting.
Yes. No, I just mean it's common. Like when your debate tonight, I've noticed that most of the individuals, especially with T-Jump, that it was like he's regurgitating, axioms that he's heard but never developed himself, never discovered, right? So understanding how they came about seems, I don't know, unknown to him upon first impression.
He's never asked the question, because for him, he's accepted the authority of like science, quote unquote, and he's just going to go with their interpretations. He's not thinking on the level of questioning their interpretations, which is what I did. Because I did looked at what was observed and made the theory based on what was actually observed without invoking any extra stuff. Because I believe that can be done. And it's not even that. There's only 4 fundamental forces and 4 fundamental particles. So 4 by 4 isn't that hard. Like the alternative model's 31 fundamental particles. And we can't even convince ourselves right now on this stream that particles exist. Because that's the thing. It's like we have these human minds. We can actually really easily conceive of particles. So it's easy to trick ourselves into thinking that they're real, because it's probably one of the easiest things to picture is just a dot.
Well, not just that, but it's also, pragmatically, it's useful. For most people to
it's really useful.
What do you think, Arjen, in your model, if you don't believe in particles?
It's not that I don't believe in particles. I get what the idea of a particle is. It's a useful construct, and it describes a lot of things really usefully, but fundamentally what the universe consists of is space-time events, mass and space-time events. And space-time events are fundamentally 3 + 1 dimensional. But because space-time events can span orders of magnitude, and because orders of magnitude are essentially independent in the sense that they're like relatively different sizes to each other, even though they're in the same canonical space, you can have space-time events that are more than 4D, as long as it spans more than one order of magnitude.
Copy that. I was curious. The 3 plus 1. The 3 is representing
Difficult.
the 3-dimensional aspects, and the plus 1 is that the observer?
Think of it as a sphere. No, it's space and time. So the space is a sphere that just goes pop like a bubble, and then the time is the unfurling of the space, right? Because it starts from nothing and it goes into a ball. So the time is what stretches it to a ball, and the 3 is the 3 separate dimensions of the ball. So that's where you're
What's the plus 1?
The plus 1 is the fact that the ball is expanding to a size. It's time.
Oh, okay.
Three space plus 1 time. That's the fundamental structure. 3 space 1 time, and then you're basically starting with that structure and folding it or permuting it or transforming it, because these are not linear transformations, right? Like, it would be cool to be able to use the language of linear algebra, and in a lot of cases I can use that language, but these are not fundamentally functions. These are forms. So it's more so a Platonic model that you're starting with a sphere, and then it gets like crushed or crumpled somehow.
I got you. You did describe before. I think I heard that time doesn't exist fundamentally.
Well, time obviously exists in some sense, right? Like,
yes.
These are the things we want to sort of hold back the desire to make these statements and confuse people with them. Time, the existence of time isn't questioned. The question is, where metaphysically does time arise? Is it primordial? That's the question. Is the time the first thing, or is some other stuff have to happen, then you get time?
Well, we know one aspect of time, that it does require an observer, right, in order to be noted.
It requires a beginning. That is the most important thing about time.
Well, what about an observer? Isn't that important?
Well, that's another thing entirely. That's an even more.
Okay.
You're going into like 20 times more complicated thing. So I would just we haven't let the others had a chance to talk, and I do want this to be like an all-way conversation. So I don't want it to become. But yeah, what do you guys think about the direction of the conversation? Jason, I can't tell if you're bored or pensive. And James, I can just see a picture.
I'm just taking it in.
Yeah.
Because I don't
want to bore you. Like Jason, like I don't want to say I've known tons of people like you, but I've known tons of people who are in the same type of discipline as you, and you're the type of person I'm doing my work for, because I want you to get an even bigger joy out of science. And I know that other people will. I'm not going to change their minds. They already, like this person project, say we haven't talked to you very much, but I feel like our beliefs are already somewhat harmonized. I hope that's not, overstating it, but I feel like largely broad strokes.
No, I find your work fascinating, and that it's like I said, for some time you like to go talk more about Ken Wheeler and about just not that he's a big celebrity or anything, but it's definitely there's a lot of correlatives. So I was fascinated by him, and then you, who elaborated more fundamentally on some of his ideas.
Yeah, there may be some way to like work it all together to a larger model for sociology, but we want to sort of work on it very gradually, because we want to abide by the non-harm principle. We don't want the things we say to increase the suffering. So we want to make sure there's like a benefit to what it is that we're saying. And the problem on this side of it is that our statements are not rising to the level of science. That's where we need to get to be, because it's like your own personal impressions of things. That's great. And to share in the wonderfulness of spirituality with the community is a necessary and wonderful thing. But to think that you can convince other people or have profitable debates on that basis of like, arguing from feelings and stuff, it doesn't work. Anything other than, so like even science doesn't always work, right? So I'm trying to like get a community vibe of like everybody questioning their own assumptions and learning how to frame what they're saying in such a way that they'll never be wrong. Because it is possible, because it is possible to never be wrong because you never make a statement of supreme precision. If you keep it vague enough but still say something, you're never going to be wrong. And that's a whole art into itself. Like, wouldn't it just be nice to have a guaranteed never be wrong clause in everything that you said, because you never went past the reasonable certainty? And it's hard to do that because you have to build this up inside yourself, this willingness to not believe something that would seem very easy. You have to not go the least action path, right? You have to resist the urge to believe these things, these shortcuts. These shortcuts don't lead to the actual fundament. You need to do the whole thing. You need to believe the whole thing for it to work. It's a unitary system. It falls apart if you try to cherry pick parts of it out. And this is essentially the problem with science. This is where science has gone wrong. It's like it's taken out certain aspects of the tradition and gone really deep into them. And it's actually worked out in a lot of ways. Like, it gave calculus, it gave a whole bunch, like uncountably many different ways of analyzing things, but there was a cost to that. And the cost was that we don't have a unified understanding of cosmology. We get more confused over time as to what like the fundamental particles mean. Like, most people have basically given up this idea that we're going to ever get a unified field model. And that's a wonderful thing to have. Like, they had a unified field model back in Plato's time, and people were much happier. I'm not saying there's a direct causal link, but it's not that it's unaffected. We are largely affected by our beliefs.
But can I just interrupt for a second?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Isn't it amazing, though, that science progresses, and at some point there are situations where science is like, wait a second, this could be totally wrong. And science has to reevaluate where it's coming from. Like, how is it possible? Like, I don't want to go into that facets of Newtonian physics and Einstein and general relativity and kind of the progression around understanding space-time, etc. That there was a phase where people are like, wait a second, what's going on? This is totally antithetical to what we thought previously. I think that's the strength of science, is that science is willing to do that. And I understand that there are biases, etc., but I'm very encouraged by the fact that when things come up from discoveries that turn everything on its head, that science is capable of dealing with that. That it's not just going to say, we have a theory, this other approach can't possibly be correct, So maybe I'm a little.
That's a good point.
Maybe I'm optimistic on that.
Well, science is unfalsifiable. Science is a true thing, but the problem is that there are two ways you can screw up your implementation of science. One is on the metaphysical level and one's on the physical level. And we're ultra good at the physical level, but we're crap at the metaphysical level. That's where we've essentially run into a problem. But we may never have gotten to the good physical level without temporarily compromising the metaphysical level. So it may just be like a necessary part of like civilizational growth type thing.
Is that another way of saying that science is a tool, but it's used by humans, and that's the issue?
I mean, most of the scientists I know, like they have no contemplation of metaphysics like that. They may be in their personal lives, but as part of their science, they're not really engaged in that aspect. And maybe that's incorrect. I'm not saying that is appropriate, but I'm just saying that's like most of the like molecular biologists and evolutionary scientists and climatologists and mathematical modelers, they're extremely obsessed with their own areas and disciplines, but they're not really contemplating like the metaphysical aspects of reality and its relationships to God or whatever. They're not doing that.
Well, even in the idea of like the word fact, right? That's used. I mean, when I've heard others use it, it's used in the absolute, right? That it's always, there's no other questioning. Just like the idea of proof, right? That science, forgive me if I'm wrong, but isn't it a series of proofs? There's always room for conjecture and modification.
There's mathematical proofs, but science works with hypotheses.
Why doesn't everybody frickin' understand this fact?
Yeah.
Can you please tell the internet that fact so that I don't have to keep reminding them, please? Science doesn't have
I will pass it on.
Things. science can't prove things. You need pramanas to prove things. We don't have pramanas. The only things that have de facto pramanas are religions. And as you know, I guess they call them presuppositions. There's a comment for Jason asking when you're going to debate Dr. Claudia Albers. I don't know who that is. Feel free to ignore that if that's a troll question.
I don't know. Should I debate Claudia Albers?
You know who it is?
I don't know who Claudia Albers is.
Oh,
should I know who Claudia Albers is? I mean, I feel bad if I don't know, if I should know who she is.
You're getting like the 3rd degree on this stream. You've had to Google so many things, but you're a good sport. I love that.
Oh my God, Claudia Albers investigates the Nibiru theory as well as chemtrailing. Oh my God,
boy.
That
sounds like fun.
Definitely not going to debate about chemtrails. But
it would be an absolute dumpster fire, but it would be fun.
That would be. Moral outrage prophet must be trolling me, but I don't know. That's a good comment. So,
do you do debates, Jason?
You know, I don't really. I kind of mix it up on the internet occasionally, and I have been thinking about doing more of that. But frankly, I'm just so busy with my own work that I don't really have a whole lot of time. But I will say that
I think you have great potential, and not to like fan your balls or anything, but you've got such a great posture and everything. Like, it would be awesome to see you become a debate champ. Just saying. And welcome to the show, Amy Newman. Thank you for joining us. Thank you so much for being with us.
Welcome to the party.
I have to grab a quick drink, but I will be listening, so I will just hand it over to Amy to share thoughts on whatever. It would be awesome if we could maybe discuss the debate to some extent, or your impressions of it, because I'm just dying to hear what you think.
Sure, and thank you
we'll
for
talk about that
having me
when she
on.
gets back. Yeah.
And
what's up, Amy?
I thought it was a good debate. Not too much. How are you guys doing?
We're doing okay. We're doing okay. I was
very well.
listening to a good conversation.
That's right. We're going back in time.
Oh, apparently that's impossible. So,
oddly enough, I don't know why, but I've been
yeah.
thinking about the perpetual motion machine today, just out of randomness. But yeah, I thought it was
attempts to make one.
Yes,
one day they'll make one, maybe.
Possible.
Yeah, it seems that way.
Isn't that the universe, as far as Jen is concerned?
That could be. I'm interested in pantheism. We don't have many pantheists come on the channel, so I'm always.
I'm still not quite sure what it actually is or a good definition of it, but
pantheism.
Yeah, I mean, just from listening to her, it sounds like she's just saying the universe itself is God, but I don't know if it has a mind or if it does things, but it's sort of like a deity. I don't quite understand.
I think her version is that if everything is a waveform, then and consciousness is also waveform, then it's hard to distinguish either one. It's really one and the same thing.
Huh.
Oh yeah, I think I have heard Jen talk about that aspect of consciousness.
Quantum.
Yeah, and like I mean, from an opposing viewpoint, I'm sure Jen would disagree and has perspectives on this, but like I see no difference between the mind and the brain, and like that consciousness is a product of the brain, and that consciousness would not exist without a brain. Although I was watching an interesting debate with Dillahunty and some other dude, where the other guy, I forget what his name was, Michael something or other, was making a good argument around like, are plants conscious? Do you need a brain to have consciousness? What's the difference between sentience and consciousness? But ultimately, my perspective is like you don't have what we define as consciousness without a brain, and if the brain goes away, there is no consciousness. And so
I think that's where the evidence leads me to believe, and I mean, I think a lot of it's philosophy, like sentience, conscience. It's a philosophical debate, but I don't think without a brain that there could be any thought or mind or.
What about? I think sentience is probably a good play on that one. Maybe without a brain there is no sentience, but if it's possible that the everything is conscious, and then definitionally the most simplex definition I've been to come up with is just reactivity. It's all that's required. Fundamentally.
Well, I know that's Amy's specialty, so she'll probably want
potentiation.
to add to it. Yeah.
Perhaps potentiation is a better word. I'm back. Yeah. So, okay. Did you, thanks. Did you want to go ahead with did you want to recap the debate or not really? Just jump into the combo.
I would not recap on points other than to say I thought it went amazingly well. I was telling James, I don't think we could have asked for a better debate. So I just want to say thank you for coming on.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're so welcome.
debate.
I'm really glad to hear that because, like, oh gosh, I was a little worried at first, but it actually went way better than I thought. So I didn't think it was going to go bad, but I always get jitters, you know.
I think you guys both held your own. It was a good discussion. Obviously, you guys disagree about a lot of things, but at least I think you guys both made your points, you know.
Yeah, and it was funny to hear what Project Sigma said when I was away there about how everything's a waveform and consciousness is a waveform. Or what? I've never actually phrased it that way. I have never phrased it that way, but I love that you did because that's actually a very interesting and logically cogent way of phrasing it. But no, I can't take credit for phrasing it like that. That doesn't mean it's not true, though.
But Amy's done a lot of thought on consciousness. So she has like her own separate model and everything. That's kind of her specialty.
Well, the basic argument is that like what you experience as consciousness is the result of the fact that it's a result of something called the observer effect. So whenever a system is measured, it undergoes waveform reduction. But measurement doesn't just mean it means diffraction. It means interference, like literally that a waveform is going through a semi-solid or crystal and creating a diffraction pattern as a result.
What do you think,
about
Amy?
those noises.
Does that mean does it mean fundamentally it's interacting with the geometry?
It means it's fundamentally interacting with its own geometry. Yes, that's a good way to phrase it.
Cool.
There's a geometric aspect to it. It's just it's proto-geometric because the rule is actually numerological. It's 3 + 1. But you cannot impose a geometry because as soon as you start to impose geometry, you've instantiated time. And time doesn't equal cause. Not every cause is temporal. Time is caused. Time is caused like space is caused. And right now we're assuming that time is the causer, when actually that's not how it works. Time is an effect of the speed of light, as you put it earlier.
Copy that. So could it be maybe the source of all this is some sort of infinite potentiality? Unrealized?
Yeah, exactly. It's what people call the grand canonical cosmic mind, the overmind, the megamind, the supermind, the grand supreme ultimate God, the Trinity, the Trimurti. There's many names for it. My argument is to the atheist is essentially, I'm not expecting you to get out on your knees and start like crying or whatever. I'm saying that the reason God exists is not just for those external purposes, there's a benefit to that. The reason is that it's the first cause. It grounds all the other causes and allows for a hierarchy of causes to unfold from it. Without a supreme cause, all the other causes are just sort of disjoint, floating around in obscurity, which is where science is at now. It's like it was what Jason was saying earlier about how everyone's hyper specialized. It's not 100% of criticism because that has its benefits, right? So it's a bit of an energetic trade-off. We have a conservation of mind, and when it's all focused on one type of metaphysics, it doesn't explore the other aspects of it, and so it's easy to miss things that would be more obvious if we were doing a top-down. If we were axiomatizing the mind, like a lot of people who are atheists are going to say, like, this is basically what I got into with T-jump. The first off, like, because I expected that to be horrible. Like, I I was so happy when James sent me the outline for this debate this time. So I was like, thank God it's not going to be another T-jump where he just like basically, he's like, I'm just going to cede my time, not give an explanation. I like starting to sweat. And he's like, makes some assertion. I'm like, okay, there's no way that this isn't going into the muck. So I just like, I asserted it. I'm like, you can't prove that the universe isn't conscious. Because I know for a fact there are extant metaphysical systems that axiomatize consciousness and they don't have any problems causally.
You can't prove a negative, right?
Yeah, you can prove that a positive assertion is fallacious. Can you prove a negative? The reason it's tricky to prove a negative is because there's more ways for something to be the negative of something else. Because an electron can be the negative of a proton, right?
Yeah.
But then the neutron is the negative of the proton electron set.
That's a different
in
concept,
another
right?
way.
That's from attraction and repulsion, right?
The antimatter is the opposite relative to the matter. What I'm trying to expound is that there's multiple ways for things to be not a thing. There's multiple, because something being not a thing is predicated on dualism. But my system doesn't predicate dualism, it predicates non-dualism. And that's why it succeeds, is because it acknowledges that any instantiation of dualism is itself a reduction event, i.e. it changes. It all
just another modality, right?
All modalities reduce your potentiation, but the obtenance of information requires you to invoke dualism.
Gotcha.
It's a chicken and egg. It's basically a we're fucked either way scenario, and both sides suck, so we try to reconcile to the least
Amy's
sucky
okay
thing
with
between
that.
two sucky things.
So it's paradoxical.
You're contending with like, all is love. Blah, 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 blah. That's one end. The other end is, I'm the best, you're shit. Those are your two ends. Is any of those actually that great? I mean, the first one is okay, but how long can you be singing Kumbayas for before somebody starts a troll fight?
True.
I don't know. Ask Darth.
More measurement. Every measurement system is a continuum, right? So
Yeah.
See, that's
dualities.
exactly the kind of thing that doesn't convince people.
Why not?
Because it's word salad. I mean, something being a continuum. If you want to frame a continuum, you have to say what are the ends of the continuum. Otherwise, you're just sounding like a hash head, and that's what we don't want to sound like. Because
I would assume that a continuum had ends.
Well,
but they're subjective or arbitrated.
The term continuum has slightly different meanings depending on context, so we should refrain from using terms that are easily confusable, because they're not. You can't be as precise. What you want is precision. You want to it's good to expound things poetically, but realize that that's what you're doing. And when you're entering the domain of debate, i.e. talking to people who don't agree with you, you want to frame it in a way that you'll convince them via their axioms, not yours. That's the main problem all debaters make, is to their own axioms in their arguments. You win when you appeal to your opponent's axioms. That's
so
the true
would spectrum
defeat.
be a better, since that kind of has ends?
See, I don't even know what it is that you're trying to say.
Oh, just that, making, in the dichotomy and in dualism, that you have these very, I suppose, identifiable ends, but there is a interplay, and the continuum is the word I was using to define the interplay between the two.
I wouldn't use any of those terms. That none of them make sense to me. I would say everything's waveforms. We was waveforms, and we're still waveforms, and it's fucking awesome. And we can tell what the waveform looks like based on the subtle cues in the body, but mostly it's in the voice and in the eyes. But it's the animating force of the body. It's so funny that people don't even believe that. Like, you think that your consciousness comes out of your brain magically. Like, that's a bigger leap logically than what I'm saying. Do you realize that, like, this way of understanding science is like an electrical signal is actually a much higher energy solution than what I'm suggesting? I'm suggesting pre-existing mind. You're suggesting ex nihilo.
Where did it come from? Where did that pre-existing
not me.
come from?
I'm not suggesting that at all. Don't Kathy Newton me.
No, it was just proverbial. It was just my proverbial ranting.
I got you.
It wasn't
Just
directed
joking.
at anybody. I was just trying to get the ideas out there because it's just like, oh my gosh, you guys can't understand how happy I am to find you, because it's like, I love debating so much, and like I love to just sit and just go into these questions forever, like, because consciousness is really just light, but it's so hard to understand why it has to be light, because you can't see the light within you. You can only see it outside, but you can't see that the reason you can see the light outside is because of the light inside. This like hyper fine light. It's also something you could compare. Like, I don't know if you know about the koshas, but that's something like you should know about the koshas. Even if you don't memorize the koshas, you should at least know what it is. And it's like layers of the human body, and there's 5 of them. And the most basic one is light. And that's the same theory as what I have now, only I determined it using secular science. But it was already true before I said it. It's just like, it's the only way to really explain why life looks so different from non-life at the end of the day. You look at yourself in a mirror, I mean, you don't look like rock at all. We don't look like rocks. Even the ugliest person on the planet doesn't look like a rock.
I'm sorry, man. I can't track this.
I didn't follow. I
don't know where this is going. Like, I mean, I in general, I guess I kind of understand what you're saying.
I just want you to be hanging around by yourself tonight and think, maybe my consciousness is a light waveform.
Okay, check this out. Believe it or not, like in my younger days, before I was like working on my graduate work, I was like, I haven't told anybody this online, but
oh my God.
Amy Newman, Amy and James are gonna be like, what the fuck? I can't believe this. But like when I was like in like before graduate school, like I was part of an astrology group. I studied heavily on like Alice Bailey and like Helen Blavatsky and like all this like Eastern
pseudo occult.
Yeah, exactly. Like very heavily into like the hierarchy, Maitreya, all these facets.
Aleister Crowley.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of that stuff. And so I certainly understand, like when you were talking about like light forms and like the associations with like the astral body or whatever. I mean, I've done a lot of like my perspective honestly now is that it's all really interesting, but none of it is based in any reality and it's not real. But I understand that. I think maybe I don't fully understand what you were saying, but
someone wanted to know if you did yoga.
I do yoga.
Outrage.
I still do yoga. I do yoga all the time.
I do yoga too.
Yeah, so I mean, lots of scientists do yoga.
Can I win you over with my model, Jason? I have a 5-step model too.
Oh, do you?
For yoga or
for consciousness? Because I believe I have a naturalistic model of consciousness. And so I'll sell it to you. I'll answer your first question by saying I do believe that the brain and mind are different. And I think there is an answer to the chicken and the egg, and it is the mind is hierarchied under the brain. That the physical is what you need, and then once you have the physical, now you can start moving into the more abstract. In fact, I would consider the mind the operating system. So we got brain, we got mind, which is the operating system. It's the neural network working together to work different programs. In fact, that brings us to layer 3, consciousness. There are conscious programs and there are unconscious programs. A unconscious program would be your heart. Your heart has to be running off the operating system, but you can't use it because that would be detrimental in a natural selection way. But you need conscious programs. You need to be able to walk around on the macroscopic landscape and collect information while being aware. walking around is the best example so that you can gather energy, but let's go hybrid. Can you imagine a conscious unconscious program, kind of like in between? Why, yes, we can. That would be breathing. So there you kind of have something like a hybrid where you can imagine natural selection where holding your breath actually has an advantage. So you need to be able to do both. So, okay, so we're already on layer 3, but we're not in space yet. We got to go down further. Let's go to my 4th layer, which is sentience. What is sentience? Sentience is a combination of 2 facts. It is the fact that you have memories and that you have emotions. Why is that important? Let's look at Pavlov's dog. Or just a mouse moving through a maze. What is going on here? They're using memories to guide themselves, and they're able to get to a destination and go, oh my, happy, 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 and the dopamine floods. And so it's this combination that you're able to build a map of the world, which is great. You can imagine a whole bunch of conscious, sentient creatures. Once again, we're not at the moon. What gets us to the moon? Well, that's my layer 5, and that is the introspection layer, and that is the metadata layer. It is the data about data. And a good example of where this can go wrong is a zit. You look at a zit, and your body is actually handling it naturally. But you're using your data and it's picking up, there may be bacteria, there may be something wrong in here, and your brain, your mind is kind of freaking out, even though your body's already handling it. And so you put all those layers together and you have a fully functioning animal, mammal, something like dolphins, like us, etc., etc. And you could imagine a gradient, because you can imagine, you say a slug is conscious, is it sentient? You can say, okay, a dog is sentient, is it introspective? And so you have this entire gradient all the way down. And that's my spiel. And I love you all.
And
we
we
love you.
let the air out of the room with that one. But yeah, it's obviously something you've spent a lot of time on. It's
Yeah, I'm a little obsessed.
just a little bit. Are we going to get a wave model?
Yeah, I think it's awesome that you're thinking about it on this level. It's like we see the same theme of structured hierarchy. And that is part of the practice, is interrogating your own experience to see that it lines up. And that's like, I would say it's like a necessary step to getting to the higher realizations, because you just need to practice.
Sure.
You can't build on nothing. So just the fact of thinking about the different levels of mind, that's such a big step. So I'm really glad that you've put a theory forward. Mine's just like basically trying to meet a scientific standard. So yours more on the descriptive side. So yeah, I've just got my model up on the thing for.
I will say I like it even more because it's an animation. I'm just going to put that out there.
Yeah, it's this awesome website where you can do like reflections in water for a given image. So I just love it so much. So that's meant to show like the measurement limit, like the limit, like the reason it stops expanding is it can only expand 3 + 1 in all directions, right? So it's just counting out from the middle, 3 + 1, 3 + 1, and then matter itself becomes precipitated in these individual spheres. And that's what we recognize as elements. There are 2 elements per sphere because there's this intrinsic dualism. And we notice there's an even other intrinsic dualism in the symmetry of the periodic table, that it is it's like a maximally symmetric object. So we can start to ask questions like, well, what does that mean? But fundamentally, what this is saying is that space and time arise together, but they're not the first cause. The first cause is the mass that's becoming a space-time event. It existed before that. And this is like
the becoming
cookie cutter. This is like a cookie cutter that it got shoved through. So this is the more abstract stuff. This is this, like, I don't blame people for not knowing anything about metaphysics. Like, and I'm honestly just super honored that you'd even be willing to be open to any of this stuff in the first place. But like, yeah, it is hard. And we don't necessarily need to spend every single day talking about metaphysics, but we should at least allow for that conversation to happen. Because the fact that it's the fact that temporality and causality aren't the same thing. I think I realized that when I was talking on the debate today. It's like, this is all the ultimate misunderstanding here that everyone is having without realizing it, is that we've mistaken temporality for causality. Does that make any sense, or is that just gibberish? Gibberish. Okay, got you. That's cool. I had to mute you, Project Sigma, because it sounded like there was some music coming through whenever Amy was talking there. And I didn't.
No, it's okay. I'm sorry. I realized like a few seconds after you muted me. Thank you.
Hey, guys, I'm going to have to get out of here.
Yeah, well, why don't we wrap it up? It's been a great
thanks for coming
show.
on, Jason.
We've been going for almost.
No, I pushed you to come on.
3 hours.
I saw you the thing. I said,
Oh, you,
go on,
James.
do it. It's my fault, yeah.
I hope it wasn't too boring for you, and I hope you got something out of it, and maybe you'll want to check out my work. Like I'm always working to put it in a way that is accessible to people and interesting and relevant for them. So I can definitely, like, I do take suggestions if people have a particular topic they want me to go into in more detail. I could definitely do that if it's workable within the model. But yeah, did you want to give some final words, and then we'll just go around in a circle and wrap her up? Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say is that I enjoyed coming on tonight. And like, honestly, I came on because I had some opposing views, but I thought we had a really nice discussion, and I really appreciated how nice you were and willing to talk about these things. I feel like we kind of butted heads in the beginning, but then as the conversation went on, I thought that it actually was really nice. And so I appreciated that. And I enjoyed being on your stream.
Oh, thanks so much. I hope you'll come back some other time.
Yeah, I will. More. And congratulations on passing 1,000 subs.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Cool. Okay, we'll kick it over to James. Thanks for being with us. Did you have any final words or wrapping up thoughts to share?
Just a really interesting discussion tonight. I felt it was a good debate. I really enjoyed listening to it, and I wanted to thank you for agreeing to come on for our first debate. It was a fun night overall. So thank you, Jen. Thanks, guys, for the interesting discussion. I just thought it was the part of the debate that sticks out to me is just when Jennifer said, "You're welcome to the world of physics" for her as yet unrecognized contributions that hopefully one day they will recognize, and they'll say thank
you. Have to put it out there. Sometimes you just have to say the thing.
She's like, "Thank you."
Absolutely.
Or "You're welcome." Yeah. But,
Thanks for being with us, James. We'll talk to you real soon. Project Sigma, what are your final thoughts? And thanks for being with us.
Well, yeah, thank you very much for having me and allowing me to be part of this. I greatly enjoyed it, and I would love to come back and be, to add some variety into questions that I have for you guys.
Sweet.
So, thank you again.
Really appreciate that. Yeah, appreciate that. Thanks for being with us. Amy joined at the end and shared your thoughts. Thank you so much. I just want to say, like, I fucking love your channel. Like, I'm into this shit for a while. I know how hard it is to put a good show together. My show looks like shit. Amy's still gracing us with her presence. I think we can all take a, lesson, because this is like tip top, like literally how many different backgrounds? 20?
It can swell. I will say that.
This takes a lot of time. So just a little note to people, like, honor the amount of dedication it takes to put together a stream that's that good. And also, like, super happy to be able to be part of the first inaugural Debate Me Bra. Hopefully there'll be some more I can come on, and looking forward to the ones that happen in the future. I messaged you a couple of ideas. I don't know if you can tell that that's me, because it's not my name on Discord. It's
she
different
figured
name.
that out. Yeah.
Okay,
I figured it out.
Okay, because I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell if you could tell, but I just thought, like, I'd put them out there in case, like, other people wanted to debate those ideas. Like, I wasn't looking to take part in those debates myself, but I really want to enshrine a debate culture. So, like, I'll just be cheering in the bleachers,
Absolutely.
even if I'm not on the stage. But go ahead, Amy, your final thoughts. Thanks again for being with us.
Yes, and Jen, I can't thank you enough for being on our first episode of Debate Me Brah. It went awesome. I thought you and Leo had a great debate in general. And if you really want my final thoughts, it's that all of you watching should like and subscribe to the Church of Entropy.
1,000 subscribers. Woo!
Thank you. Yes, it's definitely the Amy Newman crowd that pushed me over a grand. So thanks, everyone. And we'll see you this Sunday for Week in Review, if not sooner. Good night. Talk to you soon.